Act 1, Part 1 of Captain Jinks of the Horse Marines by Clyde Fitch. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Persons concerned in the play.
Captain Robert Carrolton Jinks, read by Alan Dove.
Charles La Martine, read by Adrian Stevens.
Augustus Bleecker von Vorkenberg, read by Rick Cordray.
Professor BELLIARTI, read by Alan Mapstone.
The Herald Reporter, read by Sonia.
The Tribune Reporter, read by Krista Zaleski.
The Times Reporter, read by Greg Giordano.
The Sun Reporter, read by Sandra.
The Clipper Representative, read by David Purdy.
PurdyA Newsboy, read by Tomas Peter.
Official Detective, read by Todd.
Sailor, read by Zach Hoyt.
Policeman, read by Jim Hedrick.
Telegraph Boy, read by Larry Wilson.
A Servant, read by David Purdy.
Madame Trentoni, alias Aurelia Johnson, read by Matea BracicMRS.
Mrs. Greenborough, read by Michele EatonMRS.
Mrs. Jinks, read by Lynette CaulkinsMRS.
Mrs. Stonington, Vice President of the Anti-French Literature League, read by Lindsay Clark.
The 1st Ballet Lady, Miss Petite Toes, read by T.J. Burns.
The 3rd Ballet Lady, read by Sandra.
4th Ballet Lady, Fraulein Hochspitzz, read by Krista Zaleski.
6th Ballet Lady, Mrs. Maguette, read by Jenn BrodaMARY. Madame Trentoni's Maid, read by Jenn BrodaMARY.
Narrator, read by Trisha G. The First Act, the end of October, the landing dock of the Cunard Steamship Company in New York. The Second Act, a fortnight later, Madame Trentoni's parlor in the Brevoort house. The Third Act, the same night, still at Madame Trentoni's in the Brevoort house. Time and place, New York City in the early 70s. The First Act, Part 1. The landing dock of the Cunard line, late in the morning. The side of the vessel is seen on the left, with the passengers' gangplank coming down to the center of the stage. Across the river at the back is seen Hoboken, with the Stevens house on the hill. It is a gray, misty day, with a drizzling rain which flatters the Jersey shore. The paraphernalia of a landing stage is littered about, and some small groups of luggage arrived on the steamer have not yet been removed. A sailor stands at the top of the gangplank, keeping a board guard. There is a newsboy selling the Herald, Tribune, Times, Sun, Express, and Clipper. A tired steward now and then passes in sight on the boat. A policeman walks in and out on the dock. It is raining, and everyone enters with a wet umbrella. The newsboy sitting on a barrel is whistling Captain Jinks and kicking his heels against the barrel. He offers the policeman, each time he passes him, a different paper. All the passengers except Madame Trentoni have long ago left the boat. Several truckmen and loafers are more or less busy on the premises. Peter, whistling, interrupts himself as the policeman passes.
Harold?
The policeman pays no attention to the boy at any time. Peter always continues whistling at once when he gets no answer, and continues the tune exactly where he left it off. The policeman repasses.
Tribune? Express?
He continues whistling. The policeman repasses.
Times?
Continues whistling. Policeman repasses.
World? Clipper?
Continues whistling as the policeman passes out of sight. The Tribune reporter hurries in. He goes quickly to the gangplank and starts to walk up it. The sailor at the top calls down and stops him.
Nobody ain't allowed on board.
The newsboy laughs and whistles pointedly, "Shoo fly, don't bother me."
Why not? I'm from the Tribune.
That don't make no difference, not if you was Boss Tweed from Tammany Hall.
Madame Trentoni hasn't left the boat yet, has she?
There ain't no blamed Italian on this here boat.
The young lady speaks English. I mean the great...
Peter, stopping whistling to interrupt.
Say, Jack, he means the prima donna what the young Prince of Wales says is an A1er.
Oh, you mean the opry singer? She'll be leaving soon now. There's a good deal of motion in her cabin, and there's 8 men ordered below a-struggling with her baggage.
The Tribune reporter, eagerly and with commendable zeal.
How much baggage has she?
I dunno.
The Tribune reporter comes back down the gangplank. Peter, on the barrel.
Have the Tribune?
The Tribune reporter, grandiloquently, feeling very much the importance of his position, especially as there is no other reporter there.
I am the Tribune.
He opens his umbrella and places it on the floor to dry. Peter, who is uneducated.
Huh?
I make the paper.
Where's your machine?
The Tribune reporter, pointing to his forehead.
Here.
Gee, I guess you're off your nut, aren't you?
The Tribune reporter, obtusely.
No, my boy. I'm a reporter.
All right, boss. But you ain't the only party what's after Miss Squealer in there.
The Tribune reporter, with supreme elegance.
Other gentlemen of the press, I presume?
No, it ain't no gentleman. It's a big toff. A regular lardy-da. What's been down here twice already with a gang of dandies and a brass band. The band was real discouraged the second time. Was playing Hail Columbia for all she was worth.
I know about that. The Herald man got onto it yesterday. Hello, Times.
As the Times reporter comes on.
Is she out yet?
No, but look here. Captain Jinks has been here with his chums and a band in their uniform straight from the Republican parade.
If those fellows get hold of her first, we boys won't have a chance at an interview.
Are they coming back?
Well, the band was a-kicking, but I guess the swells will be back because they was full of buckies.
They had a tug engaged to go over the bar to meet the boat tomorrow. Nobody ever dreamed she'd be in before. Think of crossing the ocean in 14 days. It's a record breaker. Mapleson calmly went on to Boston to come back tonight, or he'd be fixing everything for us.
I tell you what, we'll go get the boys now, quick, so we can all have a fair show together, and leave this youngster to tell Captain Jinks and his crowd, when they come back, that the lady won't...
She ain't no common lady. She's an opry singer, what the Prince of Wales...
Yes, Mapleson gave us that story weeks ago. You tell Captain Jinks that Madame Trentoni won't leave the boat till after lunch. Are you fly?
What's it worth?
What'll you take?
You make me an offer.
We'll give you a quarter.
The newsboy gives the Tribune reporter one look, and then sticking his thumbs in the armholes of his waistcoat, he whistles, "Shoo fly, don't bother me."
Well, what's the matter?
You get someone else to do your job. I go to Sunday school and I don't tell lies for nothing.
We'll give you $1.
All right. Pay in advance?
Not by a long shot. Collect on delivery of the lie. I'll go after the men, Jimmy, and you hang around out of the way here. Just to keep an eye on the boy and see he does his work.
Picking up his umbrella, he goes out onto the street.
Gee, lies no work for me. It's play. That there about going to Sunday school was a sample.
Look out! Here they come!
Goes outside by the boat. 3 men are heard singing Captain Jinks of the Horse Marines faintly, then more loudly as they approach and come on through the big doorway on the right. The 3 men are Charlie, Gussie, and Captain Jinks. They are good-looking young dandies, Gussie being more of a fop than the others, Captain Jinks himself having a superb figure and a frank, handsome face. All he needs is one lesson to make a fine man of him. The three march in arm in arm, Captain Jinks in the center. They wear scarlet uniforms and big bearskin caps. Each carries a bouquet of the period, small, with a flounce of lace around it. Their singing and marching is, of course, simply a joke among themselves. The policeman meets them coming from the opposite side.
Here, here. No visitors allowed on this here dock without the permission.
I say, Charlie, Gussie, who's got the permission?
Each one begins with his right-hand pocket, and all look through all their pockets in unison without success. Then Captain Jinks removes his hat and triumphantly takes out a piece of paper.
Here you are, Mr. Policeman.
The policeman, not taking the paper,
all right,
and passes on. Captain Jinks, to Peter, who sits whistling on the barrel.
Well, Horace Greeley, any signs of the opera queen yet?
Nope. Where's the band?
The band has struck, so we did our best without it.
Well, say, she ain't up yet. She ain't to leave the ball for a couple of hours yet.
The men are much disappointed, and all speak at once.
What a sell!
What a damn shame.
Who told you?
Jack Tar up there.
At this moment, two sailors appear on the ship and struggle down the gangplank with a large trunk, which they place at one side, and return up the gangplank.
Well, come along, Captain Jinks. We can't hang around here all morning.
Let's go uptown to Union Square and have a drink.
No, fellows, we might miss her. Some other crowd will get a hold of her and spoil our fun.
Everyone's on the qui-vive to entertain her. We must fill her time for a week with engagements before she leaves this dock.
Yes, sirree, by Jove. So everyone in town will see we have the inside track.
Captain Jinks, indicating Peter.
Get rid of the kid.
Go along, Horace Greeley. Scoot.
I can't.
Why not?
I got to sell my papers.
Sell them somewhere else.
Nope. I gotta sell them here. If you want me to get out, you gotta buy me out.
Well, how many papers have you?
$1.50 worth.
What'll you take for them?
$1.60.
No, you won't. Come along, boys. Chip in 50 cents each.
He starts singing Up in a Balloon, Boys. The others join in, diving into their waistcoat pockets, and each pitches $50 into Captain Jinks's hat. Two sailors bring down another big trunk, and depositing it near the first, return to the ship. Captain Jinks, to Peter.
Here you are.
Giving the money. The men stop whistling. The newsboy with his cap on one side swaggers off whistling Up in a Balloon, Boys, but steals immediately back and hides under the gangplank.
I say I'll match you both to see who pays for the landau to take her away.
In the name of all three of us?
Oh, yes, but match who pays.
Each gets out his coin.
You first, Charlie. Match me.
They throw the coins.
Heads.
Good. Gussie.
He and Gussie throw.
Tails.
Bravo. You pay for the landau, Gussie. Thank you, old man.
Shaking his hand. Charlie also shaking his hand.
Thank you.
Botheration.
The sailors bring down another trunk.
Hello, Jack. Is that little Italian bird on board awake yet?
Oh, yes. She's busy giving presents to all the deckhands.
They go back onto the ship.
I'll tell you what I'll do, fellows. I'll bet you $500.
I haven't got it.
Well, Gussie'll lend it to you, won't you, Gussie?
That's so. Course he will.
I'll bet you both $500 that I'll make love to her.
That's nothing. I'd make love to anything for $500.
Go west. I mean, I'll bet you $500 I'll get up a flirtation with her.
Make it 1,000.
Will you lend Charlie 1,000, Gussie?
Yes, of course he will.
All right, good.
Done.
They shake hands.
I think I ought to stand some chance with the fair lady. She may have broken the hearts of the blue bloods of Europe, but after all, my great-great-grandfather settled in Maryland, driven from France by the Huguenot troubles, and my family is connected with the royal blood of France. We haven't a cent left, but I think I can hold my own.
Captain Jinks, bored.
Oh, all right, Charlie.
You're not the only la-di-da here. My ancestor, the first Van Vorkenberg, came over with Peter Stuyvesant and was an early Dutch governor of New York. My family's always been mixed up with the government of the country. My father's a politician now, and so we've never had to work for our living.
Give us a rest.
Hold on a minute. What's the matter with my family? I'm Captain Jinks of the Horse Marines, formerly of Richmond, Virginia, a member of one of those real old Southern families you read about, ruined by the Civil War. Only, as a matter of fact, we were dead broke before the war began. However, never mind. Now you boys go and get the Landau.
Not if we know it. She might come out while we're gone, and that would give you an advantage. I'm not losing Gus's 1,000 so easily. I intend to get up a flirtation with her myself.
Well, so do I, by Jove.
Oh, do you? Another 500 that neither of you get your arm around her waist.
Shaking hands with both quickly.
And come on now, we'll all three go after the Landau.
They link arms and go out singing, walking down Broadway. As they go, the newsboy climbs up from under the gangplank and, placing 2 fingers of his hand in his mouth, whistles a piercing signal twice, then waves his cap. The Times reporter runs in.
Is she coming?
No, but I got something to tell you. To sell you.
The policeman enters and gives the sailor a bit of chewing tobacco, which he takes and says, "Thank ye for."
What is it?
Psst.
Motioning toward the sailor and policeman, who will hear. The sailor, who stands by.
Hello, she's a-comin' now, I guess. The old party's between decks with full sail on.
What do you say to this?
Motioning the Times reporter to one side, where he whispers to him in dumb show all about the 3 men and their bet. Surprise, curiosity, and delight are shown by the Times reporter. Meanwhile, an official, a private detective, in plain clothes, has sauntered in and meets the policeman, who has started back toward the street. The detective, in semi-confidential tone,
I understand. There's an opry singer on board this here boat who's going to land this a.m. with costumes and jewelry and a cartload of stuff. Not off yet, eh?
Nah.
Well, there's a suspicion she might try to do a bit of smuggling, and I'm detailed special to see there's no bribing of our officials. I shall do the examination myself.
He opens his coat, showing the official badge on his breast.
Just be on hand in case there's a little job for you.
The policeman, with a very different manner, most obsequious, touches his hat.
Yes, sir.
Be in earshot, and if you hear me whistle twice like this,
whistling twice,
why, come along.
The policeman, touching his hat.
Yes, sir.
He offers the detective a piece of chewing tobacco.
Ah, thank you.
Takes a bite and returns the plug. The policeman passes out. Meanwhile, the newsboy and the Times reporter have finished.
Look here, keep mum about this, and I'll make it worth your while. I've got to consult with Mr. Mapleson before I publish a thing like that. But if it ever is published, it's got to be my story. Why, I ought to get a rise of salary if I get that for my paper.
The detective starts to go as 4 men enter hurriedly, breathless, running in, all with dripping umbrellas. The Herald Reporter, the Sun Reporter, the Tribune Reporter, and the Clipper Representative.
Off
yet?
Almost knocking over the detective.
Excuse me, gentlemen.
And exits.
No, but she's expected shortly. Where's the express? The World?
They're waiting at the Brevoort House with her maid and old Belliarti.
Where's the bouquet?
Here.
They all gather around him and unwrap a huge and beautiful bouquet, which is covered with 5 different newspapers, the latter soaking wet from the rain.
We protected it from the rain with a representative sheet of each one of us, so as to show no partiality, and have the bouquet represent in every way the United Press of New York.
The bouquet is in the shape of a cone, whose base is nearly a yard in diameter. There are 2 tiers of red and white roses, alternating, and the structure is crowned by one important calla lily. A large bow with streamers of red, white, and blue ribbon adds a last gala and patriotic note. Mrs. Greenborough appears on the ship and hesitates at the top of the gangplank. Peter, aside to the sailor,
Come on, let's sell 'em. Here's the old lady. Let's pretend she's the prima donna.
The sailor, chuckling.
You're a rum 'un.
He goes up the gangplank to help Mrs. Greenborough.
Hey, psst!
Peter whistles again between his fingers. The reporters all turn. The bouquet is unwrapped.
Here she is.
Mrs. Greenborough comes down the gangplank. She is a pretty, middle-aged lady, kind, motherly, and a little foolish. She has one especial characteristic. She talks whenever starting in a steady stream, but never finishes a speech, as no one will wait for her, but either interrupts or leaves her. When interrupted, she invariably stops short with a broad and sweet smile, good-naturedly accepting what has become for her the inevitable. She is dressed a few years behind the times, but is somewhat prejudiced against the quiet colors. All the reporters drop their umbrellas and rush to meet her. They reach the foot of the gangplank just as she does, and gathering all to the right side, bow low and offer her the big bouquet.
Welcome, Madame, to our great country, the American Eagle, whose own high sea carries from the shores of the Atlantic to the Pacific's golden strand, welcomes her sister songbird, and the press of New York offer their united compliments and felicitations with the accompanying bouquet.
Giving the bouquet with a bow, which he has copied from one of Lester Wallach's. All the reporters applaud.
Bravo, Pat.
The newsboy on his barrel and the sailor at the top of the gangplank are very much amused. Mrs. Greenborough is tremendously surprised, and taking the bouquet is followed to one side by all the reporters, who encircle her.
My word, I never was so surprised in all my life, nor so overpowered, nor so fluctuated either, for I'm sure I'm speechless. I can't say a word. Only fancy, this is the first bookie I've had donated to me since my old gentleman used to call me pretty pet names in the gone-by days.
She continues talking in a steady stream, but the Times and the Herald reporters come away from the others and speak to each other aside.
For heaven's sake, there must be some mistake.
She? 18 years old? She's 3 times 18.
Does Mapleson want to tell us the prince gave Grandma an emerald bracelet?
Gee, I made a mistake. That ain't the party. That must be her mother.
Oh, it's the companion, of course. What idiots. Get back the bouquet.
How? Bill.
The Tribune reporter joins them.
She can't be.
No, it's the chaperone. Go on, get back the bouquet.
What? Get it back? I can't. Here, Pete.
The Sun reporter leaves Mrs. Greenborough gladly.
Say, Shorthand isn't quick enough to take down her conversation.
Don't bother. It's the wrong party. Get back the bouquet.
Ask for it or grab it.
The Clipper representative quickly joins them from Mrs. Greenborough, who is still talking and raises her voice a little as they leave her, but seeing their backs toward her, breaks off in the middle of a sentence, smiling, and smells her bouquet. The Sun reporter, the Times reporter, the Tribune reporter, and the Herald reporter,
We've made a mistake.
The newsboy whistles shrilly through his fingers to attract their attention, and they all turn quickly to look as Aurelia appears on the ship. She is quite the most lovely creature that ever came, like Venus Aphrodite, from the sea. Youth and beauty join in making her adorable, and a charming individuality, with a sense of humor bewilderingly attractive, makes her victory over mere man, irrespective of age or station, child's play. Her modish bustle only accentuates the grace of her girlish figure, and even a waterfall only seems to make a friendly background for her perfect brow and finely poised head. She carries in her arms a very small black and tan dog. She wears an ermine fur tippet and carries a muff. The reporters quickly draw up to one side. Aurelia stops at the top of the gangplank for a moment, looking around her and smiling, and then runs gaily down.
Hip, hip, hurrah! Here we are at last on American soil. Planks, never mind, soil. A pluribus unum.
She stands by the foot of the gangplank. All the reporters raise their hats. Mrs. Greenborough, accustomed to Aurelia's beauty and at present entirely self-absorbed.
Oh, Aurelia, darling, do look at the beautiful bookie these dear Americans have given me. Did you ever see?
No, I never did. Good morning, gentlemen.
All the reporters bow low. The Times reporter, stepping slightly forward.
Welcome, Madame, to our great country, the American eagle, whose own high sea carries from the shores of the Atlantic to the Pacific's golden strand, welcomes her sister songbird, and the press of New York offer their united compliments and felicitations with the bouquet which will arrive at your hotel this evening.
Thank you very much, I'm sure. Here, Mrs. G, please hold Camille.
Giving the small black and tan dog to Mrs. Greenborough.
I call him Camille because Marguerite Gautier is so long, and I wanted to name him after my first great success. You are all the reporters, aren't you?
Smiling ravishingly straight into every one of their faces.
They told me you'd be here.
She shakes hands all around with each one of them as she speaks.
I'm so glad. I'm dying to be interviewed.
The Herald reporter, apropos of her walk.
We see you have the Saratoga stride in England.
You mean my walk? With the Grecian bend? Oh, but we call it the Brighton dip. Yes, it's very fashionable with us.
To what hotel do you go?
The Brevoort House on the Fifth Avenue at 8th Street. I'm told that is best, and not so far uptown as the Fifth Avenue Hotel on the Broadway.
And much nearer the new Academy of Music, where you are to sing.
Did Mrs. Greenborough present herself?
No, I thought I'd better...
She stops short with a smile, interrupted.
Quite right. This is my aunt, gentlemen.
Elaborate bows.
Ballet girls and opera comique singers are obliged to have a mother, you know, but grand opera and Shakespeare can travel with an aunt.
Fancy, I haven't yet half thanked.
Smiles, interrupted.
What lovely weather! I've always heard so much of your American climate.
But we call this very bad.
Not to me, I assure you, who sailed from Liverpool. I call it almost sunny, only, dear me, very warm.
Taking off her furs and placing them on a trunk.
They told me it was so cold here.
And how do you like America?
Oh, I adore it. It's superb.
Looking about her at the little dock and speaking in the stereotyped manner.
It's so enormous, so great a country. I'm amazed at its size.
Then coming down to a more natural manner, she laughs.
Oh, of course. I've not seen very much yet. What town is that across the river over there? Is that Boston?
No, that's Hoboken.
Oh, a suburb, I presume.
Yes, of Hamburg.
I hope to see a great deal of your country. I'm mad to go to A.T. Stewart's shop and to see Saratoga, which I've heard heaps about. And the very first morning I have free from a rehearsal, I've promised myself I shall run over to Niagara Falls and back.
All the reporters are following her with lightning rapidity, looking up now and then, smiling and nodding to her as she talks.
Mrs. G?
Yes, my love.
Do go see why they don't bring out the rest of my luggage.
To the reporters,
There are 48 boxes.
Don't you want...
Nothing, dear heart, please go.
Mrs. Greenborough goes up the gangplank into the boat. Aurelia continues to the reporters.
Did you get that? I have 48 boxes.
That's a good many more even than Paraparosa brought over.
Oh, but she depended entirely on her voice.
What did you make your debut in?
La Traviata. Has it been sung here yet?
Sitting on one of her trunks.
Oh, yes, often. But we understood there was a probability of changing.
Changing? Why?
Well, there have been several letters written to the Evening Post asking that you make your debut in a less risque opera.
But it's my great success.
The Ladies' Anti-French Literature League is leading the movement. There's a great feeling against the play. Lots of people won't go to see it.
But how absurd. No one ever understands what an Italian opera is about. Oh dear, I hope I shall be a success. I'm awfully nervous. Oh, please like me.
The reporters stop scribbling a moment to throw up their hats and shout.
We do!
Two sailors bring more luggage and go back.
I'm afraid you'll think me a very foolish young person. I do so want you to like me. You know, I am really an American.
All the reporters look up, surprised.
Really?
Yes, my father came from Trenton, New Jersey.
All the reporters drop their heads quickly to their tablets and go on taking notes at a furious rate.
That's how I get my name, Trentoni, don't you see? I'm a New Jersey Italian. My real name is Johnson, but of course that wouldn't look at all well on the bills. Miss Aurelia Johnson in Semiramide. I haven't been in America since I was 3 years old, but really it does all look familiar. At least I wish it did.
The Tribune reporter, as they all write,
You were taught singing in Italy?
Yes, my mother sang in the chorus with Titians, and the night I was born she represented a princess at a ball in the second act. So you see, I am really of noble birth. I was left an orphan at 3, and then my best friend, Signor Belliarti, took care of me like a father and mother both. You know Papa Belliarti?
Yes, we've heard the story. Your ballet master, I believe.
Yes, bless him. He's worn the same pattern of clothes for 50 years. Would as soon as think of changing his affections as altering the cut of his coat. It was through his friendship with Arditi I had my chance with Mapleson in London, where I've sung principally the last 2 years.
Do you know the royal family?
Not intimately, that is to say, personally, but I know them very well, by sight. You see, they don't go to the opera since the death of the Prince Consort.
Mrs. Greenborough comes back down the gangplank.
My dear young gentleman, she's turned the heads...
Stops with a smile, interrupted. Aurelia, rising.
Please get out my pink dolman. This one is so warm.
But tell them how the elite...
Stops with a smile, interrupted, and goes to a large bundle of shawls, which she undoes and takes out the pink dolman.
Oh yes, the Uppertondom have been entrancingly kind to me. But I'll tell you a secret. I want the big crowd to love me. I want to outdo Lydia Thompson. I want to win the hearts of the gallery boys.
Peter throws his cap up in the air and shouts,
Hooray!
Aurelia, seeing him,
What a nice boy. Mrs. G, give him a 6pence. Oh dear, how much is a 6pence?
12 cents.
Then give him a 12-cent piece. It's one of those little silver things, you know.
Mrs. Greenborough does so. Sailors bring down more luggage and again go back. A telegraph boy appears with a telegram.
Madame Trentoni?
All the reporters, going to the boy,
Yes.
They all go back in a body to Aurelia. The Times reporter gives her the telegram. Aurelia, opening it.
A wire! How entrancing!
Somebody sign.
The Tribune reporter grandiloquently signs, and the telegraph boy leaves.
It's from Mapleson. He'll arrive at 4. Didn't expect the ship in till tomorrow. Wasn't it superb, our trip? We broke the record for the Atlantic. A good omen for me. Only think, we crossed in 13 days. It takes your breath away.
We'll cross in less than 10 days yet.
Oh dear, I shouldn't like to go so fast as that. It would make me dizzy.
Here is your dolman, my dear. I don't know if...
The Times reporter and Tribune reporter both take hold of the dolman.
No, wait. Let me see. There must be no partiality.
She offers her right arm to the Herald reporter, who pulls off that sleeve.
Thank you.
She turns to the Sun reporter and offers her left arm. He pulls off the left sleeve.
Thank you.
Taking the jacket from the Sun reporter, she gives it to the Clipper representative.
Will you give that to Mrs. Greensboro, please?
He does so, and Mrs. Greenborough puts it away among the straps. Aurelia, turning to the Tribune reporter and Times reporter, who hold the dolman between them.
Now together, gentlemen, please.
She turns her back upon them, and they place the dolman on her shoulders. Turning quickly again, she curtsies low to all of the reporters, laughingly.
Thank you all very much.
All the reporters take off their hats and bow. Sailors bring out more luggage.
Are you interested at all in politics?
Oh, yes, I adore politics. Don't all women?
We're having a pretty severe campaign here between Grant and Greeley. I don't suppose you remember the war?
Oh, yes, I do perfectly. Why, I was 13 years old.
Impossible. Mr. Mapleson says that you are now only 18.
Does he? Oh, well, that's only operatically I'm 18, but politically I'm 22. Of course, I never approved of but one kind of slaves. Men slaves.
You have.
Looking about him.
5 here.
More bows.
Bravo! Now you know an Englishman wouldn't have thought of that till tonight, and then he'd have mailed it to me in a postcard.
Who do you favor for president?
Aurelia, smiling.
Oh, I don't know. Who do you?
Ah, but that's what we want to get out of you.
Aurelia, taking him one side and linking her arm confidentially in his.
Now look here. Let's keep this between ourselves. Who does your journal?
The Herald reporter, rather flattered.
General Grant.
Of course.
She shakes hands with the reporter.
A great general, and I adore soldiers.
No stealing a march.
Oh, that's all right.
He joins the others. Aurelia, taking the Tribune reporter to one side.
What's your paper?
The Tribune, founded by the Democratic candidate for president, Horace Greeley.
Aurelia, aside to the Tribune reporter.
He founded a newspaper, did he? Then he's my man, for what would we artists do without the press? I adore the press.
They rejoin the others. Sailors bring on more luggage.
Will you have the livestock out too, ma'am?
Oh, the darlings! Yes, indeed.
The sailors go back onto the ship.
My other dogs.
To Mrs. Greenborough.
But that's not all my luggage.
Papa Belliarti and your maid took your stage clothes with them to the hotel early this morning.
Papa Belliarti was here, and I didn't see him.
You were asleep, and he wouldn't have you wakened.
Dear old darling. And I haven't slept a wink all night. I was so excited knowing I'd see him this morning. Let's make haste. I'm afraid, gentlemen, I must ask you now to excuse me. Oh, but just wait a minute. Mrs. G, give me my camel's hair shawl from the Queen. From the Queen?
Repeating with emphasis, lest the reporters should not catch it, and watching them from the corner of her eye to see the effect, she throws off her dolman and takes from Mrs. Greenborough the shawl.
It is easier to wear during the examination. I presume you are all taking notes of my dress.
The Herald reporter, smiling.
Well, we're doing our best.
Listen, I'll get Mrs. G to help you. Mrs. G, give me another hat too. I'm tired of this one. Give me the Empress Eugenie.
To the reporters.
The last bonnet she designed before her flight from the Tuileries. And it still holds its own.
Mrs. Greenborough brings it, and Aurelia puts it on.
Did you?
Yes, dear heart. Now go with these charming gentlemen and describe all the things I've worn. Outside things.
Aside to her.
And just hint at silk linings and Valenciennes lace. I've been told they put everything in their awful papers over here.
I'm sure I'll be...
Aurelia, pushing her toward the reporters.
Of course, who wouldn't be delighted in such alluring company? Good morning, gentlemen.
All the reporters, bowing.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
They go off to the street with Mrs. Greenborough, she talking all the time, describing Aurelia's dress, etc. The Herald reporter hangs back. Aurelia, to the Herald reporter, smiling but kindly.
Don't mind interrupting the dear soul. She expects it, and besides, it rests her. We never let her finish a sentence for fear she would die of loss of breath at the end.
Thank you very much, and allow me to promise you a brilliant success.
He starts to go.
Are all reporters handsome?
The Herald reporter, red but happy.
They would like to be in your eyes, Madame Trentoni.
He exits in a seventh heaven. Aurelia, flicking her hand after him, calls.
Superb!
She turns to the newsboy.
Boy, come here a minute. Now, between ourselves, tell me something. Which is the best paper here? Which do you sell the most?
Lady, they all was second class what was here. The only real paper in New York is the Fireside Companion.
Captain Jinks, Charlie, and Gussie are heard whistling Captain Jinks in the distance.
Ma'am, there are some dandies here now to welcome you. Hear 'em? There's been a political parade today, and they're all tugged out in their uniforms. And I'll tell you, they're high-steppers, A1ers, blue-blooders, regular lardy-daws.
End of Act 1, Part 1. Act 1, Part 2 of Captain Jinks of the Horse Marines by Clyde Fitch. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Act 1, Part 2. Captain Jinks, Charlie, and Gussie are heard whistling Captain Jinks in the distance. The whistling changes to singing, and the three enter from the street singing Captain Jinks. They stop short in the middle of a word as they see Aurelia, who, pretending not to notice them, looks at a label on a trunk. The newsboy whistles Up in a Balloon, Boys, and goes behind a trunk.
She's off.
She's a bouquet.
She's a whole floral emblem. I will certainly do a little flirting here myself. Everything's square now, fellows, and the best man wins. Go along, Captain Jinks. Introduce your pals.
They step toward Aurelia, Captain Jinks slightly ahead. The newsboy stops whistling.
I beg your pardon, Madame Trentoni?
Aurelia turns.
Yes?
Pray allow us to welcome you to New York. Your coming turns October into June, and we will not miss the birds this winter since you will be singing in the Academy trees.
Offering his bouquet. Aurelia takes his bouquet.
Thank you very much, but remember there are birds and birds.
May I present Mr. Charles La Martine?
Charlie bows and gives his bouquet.
Twice welcome, madame.
And may I present Mr. Augustus van Vorkenberg, familiarly known as Gussie, also Mother's darling.
Gussie to Captain Jinks.
Shut up.
Bows and gives his bouquet.
Thrice welcome.
Thank you.
To Captain Jinks.
And now won't one of your friends present you?
This is Captain Jinks of the Horse Marines.
Oh, yes, I've heard of him.
No, I am Robert Jinks, tremendously at your service.
It doesn't really make any difference because I never remembered names, but you are all very kind. I fancy you are some more reporters.
Oh, I say, no!
I thought you might be. They seem to be such handsome men.
No.
No.
Oh, then you must be the editors.
No, madam, we won't deceive you. We are only 3 good-for-nothings who have engaged seats in the front row for your entire season.
If you want me to believe that, do put on your hats, for you don't look the part at all.
We want to know if there's anything in the world we could do for you.
We would like to plan something for your amusement. Would you tell us your hotel?
Aurelia, after a second's pause.
The Fifth Avenue.
Gussie, who is really an ass, ties a knot in his handkerchief so as to remember it.
There is to be a croquet match day after tomorrow at the fashionable club. Perhaps you would care to go. If so, we would be glad to arrange.
Mrs. Greenborough comes back from her walk, having evidently been shaken by the reporters at an early stage in the game.
You're very kind. I never could understand the game, but my chaperone adores it and would love to come, I'm sure.
Captain Jinks, who has not seen Mrs. Greenborough.
We should be charmed.
It'll be very dressy.
Dear Mrs. G, I want to present to you 3 New York gentlemen who have most kindly come to welcome us. Mrs. Greenborough.
The 3 men bow, saying, Madame, but with a note of poignant disappointment in their voices.
And they want you, dear, to go to a croquet match with them.
My word, and that will be a treat. Thank you very much, gentlemen. My love, here come your pets. What shall...
Interrupted, as the sailors enter with 2 large dogs, a Newfoundland and a white Spitz, and a very large cage containing a small live monkey. The second sailor returns to the boat after putting the monkey down beside the gangplank.
Oh, yes, the darlings.
Going to meet the sailor with the dogs, she stops to speak to Mrs. Greenborough.
Did you tell the reporters about that beastly monkey?
Oh, no, I forgot.
My dear, how careless of you. So long as Mapleson insists on my having the horrid thing, you should have said the Khedive of Egypt gave him to me. That would have sounded superbly.
She goes to the sailor and takes the leaders of the 2 dogs from him. The sailor goes back onto the boat.
You blessed old dogs, you. The poor things must be mad for a little exercise. Oh, Mr.
In front of Charlie. Charlie, flattered at being especially addressed.
La Martine.
Bowing.
You said you wanted to do something for me. Will you take Leonora for a walk?
I beg your pardon?
Aurelia, giving him the leader of the Newfoundland dog.
This is Leonora, out of Trovatore, you know. Just a bit of a stroll and back, say 10 minutes?
Looking him straight in the eyes and smiling sweetly.
With pleasure, if I mustn't go alone.
Certainly not.
She crosses to Gussie.
Mr. Dundreary?
Gussie, bowing.
Augustus Bleecker von Vorkenberg.
What a grand name. You'll go along and take Reseda, Barber of Seville, won't you, Gussie?
Ah, but Charlie and I are no company for each other.
I see. You want ladies' society. Mrs. G.
Taking her arm.
You want a little walk too. Yes, you do. You'll never get that extra £10 off if you lose a single morning. Take Camille along.
Giving her the black and tan.
Now be off. Goodbye, darlings. That's for the dogs.
Charlie, turning.
Which pair?
Clever, very clever.
Charlie, Gussie, and the 3 dogs and Mrs. Greenborough exit. Mrs. Greenborough talking about how glad she is for a glimpse of land.
Have you saved the monkey for me?
Oh, I wish you would. Will you? Take him and lose him. I'm afraid of him, you know.
Then why do you keep him?
It's Mapleson's idea. He thinks it makes me interesting. Though why a monkey should do that, I don't know, and I'd sleep happier tonight if that wretched animal was out of the way.
Would you mind walking a few steps over in that direction and keeping your back turned?
What are you going to do?
She goes a few steps to the left and stands with her back turned. Captain Jinks goes to the newsboy, who is enjoying himself with the monkey in the cage. At the same time, the sailor comes out and down the gangplank and calls to Aurelia.
Miss, ma'am.
Aurelia, with her back turned.
Do you mean me?
Don't turn, please, till I tell you.
The policeman comes slowly along. The sailor, on the gangplank.
Don't you want me to get the inspector for you? Your things is all out.
Oh, yes, please do. I do want to get away.
All right, Jack. I'm passing. I'll send him along.
Thank ye.
Exits on boat. Policeman walks on. Peter, who has been told by Captain Jinks he may have the monkey for his own if he will take it away, jumps up with a wild howl of delight.
Hee! To keep!
Shh! Yes. Hurry now, and quiet.
Motioning him off with the cage. The newsboy seizes it.
May I turn now?
In 2 minutes.
The newsboy, rushing past the policeman with the cage, is at this moment nabbed by him.
Here! Where are you going with that animal?
That's all right. It's my affair. Have a drink.
Gives him a quarter. The newsboy passes out with the monkey.
Thank you, sir. You're a gentleman.
Goes. Captain Jinks to Aurelia.
Now, the monkey's gone, and you saw nothing, know nothing, so you see you can't be blamed. Mapleson can complain in the papers and have the docks better policed.
Really, you've made yourself my friend for life.
I hope to be permitted to take the monkey's place, so far as being often in your company is concerned.
Don't you think you young men were rather impertinent, however?
Yes, now I've met you, I think we were. Still, I hope you'll forgive us.
Oh, I will. You.
And I hope I'll deserve that. Please, isn't there anything I could do for you? I don't suppose you know many people here.
Not a soul.
And you must go about. There's lots to see. Please, let me take you. I'm more or less of an idiot, I know, but so are most men.
Yes, it's not much of a distinction.
I was going to add, so far as women are concerned.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Really, joking aside, I ask you, mayn't I call upon you at your hotel?
I'll think it over.
Today?
No, I shall spend today with my dear foster father. You know Professor Belliarti? He came over a month ago to drill the ballet. The first time we've been separated since I was 3 years old.
She has forgotten herself and is speaking with real feeling.
He's the sweetest, dearest, most unselfish old creature who has given me everything I have in the world.
She stops short, suddenly realizing what she is saying.
Oh, I beg your pardon for going on so.
You needn't beg my pardon, for I can match your old gentleman with a dear little old lady living on a plantation far away down in Virginia, who's done her very darndest for me.
They look at each other a moment without speaking, with a mutual understanding of each other's nature.
You may come and see me tomorrow.
She gives him her hand. Captain Jinks, taking her hand.
Thank you.
Mrs. Stonington and Miss Merriam come timidly down the street. They are of middle age, and dressed a trifle out of date. Miss Merriam, who is of a decidedly shrinking nature, is attired in a vivid shade of bottle green heavily laid upon black. A quantity of green fringe, however, hints at her heart being still young, and her spirits capable of gaiety, a fact also abetted by a spotted net over her waterfall. Mrs. Stonington, more dominant and evidently the spokeswoman, favors a strict magenta in her apparel. Both are simple, good-hearted, kindly intentioned, but misguided ladies, the Vice President and the Secretary of the Anti-French Literature League. They act quite without malice. Mrs. Merriam is deaf and dumb.
I beg pardon. Can you tell me where to find Madame Trentoni?
I am Madame Trentoni.
Oh, really?
She turns and with her fingers tells Miss Merriam that this is Madame Trentoni. She then introduces her companion.
This is Miss Merriam, the corresponding secretary.
Miss Merriam bows smilingly.
How do you do?
And I am Mrs. Stonington, the Vice President of the Anti-French Literature League.
How do you do?
Aside to Captain Jinks.
I thought they had come to apply for places in the ballet.
While Aurelia is speaking to Captain Jinks, Miss Merriam has talked on her fingers to Miss Stonington. Aurelia turns before she finishes and shows her surprise at Miss Merriam's behavior.
My friend says to tell you at once that she is deaf and dumb, but she will be able to understand perfectly what you say from the motion of your lips.
How interesting.
I presume you have not had much experience in singing to deaf and dumb people. What I mean to say is that you don't understand the language.
Not at all. Will you sit down?
Motioning to some trunks. Miss Stonington and Miss Merriam sit.
Thank you.
She looks up at Captain Jinks.
Oh, Signor Trentoni, I presume?
Captain Jinks bows in elaborate acquiescence.
No, how dare you? This is a friend of mine who has kindly come to welcome me.
Mr. Jinks.
Bowing. The two ladies bow back. Mrs. Stonington to Captain Jinks.
Do sit.
He does so on another trunk. He and Aurelia are much amused. Miss Merriam nods her head and smiles acquiescence during all of Mrs. Stonington's speeches.
We read in the papers this morning you had arrived sooner than expected, and we decided to come right down and take the bull by the horns.
Meaning me, I presume.
Trying hard not to laugh.
Yes.
She is interrupted by Miss Merriam, who tugs at her arm and makes a few rapid movements with her fingers.
Yes, dear, and just like you.
To Aurelia.
She's so sensitive. She thinks it would be politer to say, take the cow by the horns.
What can I do for you?
It is stated in the papers that you intend to make your debut in a piece called Traviata, which I am given to understand by a number of the members of our league who have read the book, is the French drama La Dame aux Camélias.
The papers and the league members are quite right.
I am told the heroine is a young person, no better than she should be, in fact, not so good.
Miss Merriam tugs violently at Mrs. Stonington's arm and makes a few rapid passes with her fingers.
Of course, I never thought.
To Aurelia.
Excuse me, but would your gentleman friend be so kind as to walk to the other end of the dock for a few minutes?
Certainly. My friend is a very gallant man, Mrs. Vice President. I'm sure he would jump off the dock if a lady asked him.
Not by a long shot.
But I shouldn't think of asking such a thing. He might get drowned.
Captain Jinks, rising.
Shall I go?
Yes, please, just for a second or two.
Captain Jinks withdraws outside by the boat.
Our mission is a very delicate one.
I think I should call it indelicate.
Oh, no. We want to ask you to make your debut in some other opera, and we have here a petition to that effect, signed by over 600 women and schoolchildren of Harlem, Brooklyn, and Jersey City. Oh, yes, and Williamsburg.
Handing to Aurelia the paper.
Thank you so much. What a splendid advertisement.
We heard your voice was most beautiful, and a great many of us want to hear you who couldn't go to that opera.
But do you know, when you come right down to the stories of the opera, I don't think there's much choice between them.
Oh, dear me, yes.
Miss Merriam nods her head quietly but firmly and with a sweet smile.
Well, what one would you propose?
Faust.
Miss Miriam looks transported as she recalls the angels of the final scene.
Oh, but that isn't a goody-goody story by any means.
My dear, it's a sweet opera. I remember the beautiful tableau, like the death of little Eva at the end.
I suppose you didn't notice that Mephistopheles seems to have got Marguerite after all, for the angels always take up quite a different young lady, and seem perfectly unconscious of their mistake.
Never mind, the story is so pure.
But do you know what happens between the second and third acts?
On the stage?
Oh dear, no, in the story.
Faust and Marguerite get married.
No, they don't. That's the trouble.
Mrs. Stonington, staggered.
What?
They didn't.
Bless my soul.
She rises aghast. Miss Miriam pulls Mrs. Stonington's arm and makes a few rapid signs. Mrs. Stonington to Miss Miriam.
I should say so.
Kisses her gratefully. To Aurelia.
She says she's glad we asked that young man to go away.
Miss Miriam again pulls Mrs. Stonington's elbow and motions.
You dear thing, how like you.
To Aurelia.
She wants to know why you don't make your debut in oratoria. Come along now, do.
Miss Miriam tugs again at Mrs. Stonington's arm and makes a few more finger movements.
Yes.
To Aurelia.
The women of America ask you to sing in oratoria.
Captain Jinks is heard whistling, Champagne Charlie is my name. Aurelia, who can hardly restrain her laughter.
I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm willing if you can persuade my manager. You see, really, these things are entirely in the hands of Mr. Mapleson.
Oh, we'll see him at once.
Miss Miriam tugs Mrs. Stonington's elbow and motions.
Quite so.
To Aurelia.
She says men are so easy. We shall consider it settled.
Captain Jinks stops whistling to call.
I'm whistling so as not to hear. Must I take another trip?
No, come in.
Captain Jinks returns. Aurelia to Mrs. Stonington.
Mr. Mapleson arrives this afternoon from Boston and will stop at the New York hotel.
Thank you. If you should need some extra ladies in the chorus for the oratoria, I would come. I know most of them, having belonged to the Oratoria Society for many years. We wear white dresses with blue sashes across the left shoulder, which makes a very pretty effect.
Miss Miriam tugs Mrs. Stonington's arm and makes a few motions. Mrs. Stonington nods her head and turns to Aurelia.
And Miss Miriam always goes with me. She fills up and makes the chorus look bigger.
All of that, of course, will be left with Mr. Mapleson.
Captain Jinks, with difficulty restraining his laughter.
Do they have men singers in an oratorio?
Oh, dear me, yes. We have some very handsome gentlemen singers in the club.
I wish you'd just mention me to Mr. Mapleson as a candidate.
Mrs. Stonington, smiling apologetically.
Oh, I'm afraid I couldn't do that. Don't you think it would look rather bold, my suggesting a young man and a perfect stranger?
Miss Miriam tugs Mrs. Stonington's elbow and makes a few motions.
Yes.
To Aurelia.
We won't keep you any longer. We're very much obliged to you, I'm sure. And the League will signify their gratefulness by giving you an afternoon reception in the rooms of the Young Men's Christian Association. Goodbye.
Bows. Miss Miriam also smiles and bows. Aurelia, also bowing.
Goodbye.
Mrs. Stonington takes Miss Miriam's arm, and they turn their backs to Aurelia a second to consult. Miss Stonington motions a moment. Miss Miriam nods her head delightedly. They both turn and go to Aurelia with outstretched hands, very pleased with themselves for the gracious thing they think they are doing.
Goodbye.
She and Aurelia shake hands.
Goodbye.
Then Miss Miriam and Aurelia shake hands.
Goodbye.
Mrs. Stonington, to explain and excuse their cordiality.
She says we don't consider singers actresses.
Very few are.
Mrs. Stonington and Miss Merriam leave the dock in a manner of pleased satisfaction. Aurelia, laughingly to Captain Jinks,
What do you think Mapleton will do with them?
Men are so easy.
Oh, but she, poor thing, was deaf and dumb. The only kind of woman who ever would have said that.
I should hate a silent woman in a house. It would be like a bird who couldn't sing, a rose that had no scent, a baby that couldn't cry, a piano never played upon.
Oh, I don't suppose there ever was a piano that didn't at least once do its worst with Rubinstein's Melody in F. Is this the inspector?
as the private detective enters with the policeman. The detective has a folded paper in his hand.
I reckon he is.
The detective and policeman pass along the trunks, counting them.
I'm so nervous about the customs. I wish the whole thing were over. We hear such awful tales at home about them. I haven't a thing dutiable, of course, not a thing. I've only 48 boxes anyway, and they contain only my few personal effects.
I'll see what I can do with him to make him lenient as possible.
The detective, aside to the policeman,
Keep in hearing distance of my whistle. If they're going to try any bribing tricks, it'll come soon.
The policeman passes on, and the detective approaches Aurelia.
Madame Trentoni?
Yes, sir. I hope you're not going to disturb everything. The boxes were so beautifully packed.
I must do my duty, madam.
We expect you to do that, officer, only don't exaggerate it.
Your husband, madam?
That's not your business.
Aurelia, to Captain Jinks.
Oh, don't make him angry.
To the detective, very sweetly, but with some nervousness.
It's a friend who came down to meet me. I had a splendid crossing. Do you like ocean travelling?
Never tried it. Would you prefer a woman examiner, ma'am?
Oh, no, I think I'd rather have a man. Unless, of course, you're going to be personal. If you're going to look for violins in the flounces of my petticoats and diamonds in my bustle, I'd rather have a lady. A perfect lady.
The detective, looking at her.
I don't consider there'll be any need for that.
There. I knew the minute I saw you, you were going to be sweet and nice and obliging, and I'm going to be equally so and help you all I can.
Charlie and Gussie return from their walk with the two dogs, followed by Mrs. Greenborough, who is talking, although a little breathless from having been evidently hurried in her walk.
My word, though, gentlemen, you do walk fast. It's more...
Come along, Mrs. G. We want the keys.
Mrs. Greenborough, joining her by the trunks.
Has the...
Yes, this is the inspector.
How do you do, sir? We haven't a thing. Not a single solitary...
I've told him, Mrs. G.
To the detective.
By the by, you will find a box of new-looking curls and a couple of waterfalls, but they've been worn heaps of times. By me, I mean, as well as the lady who grew 'em.
Mrs. Greenborough to Captain Jinks.
Would you hold Camille?
Aurelia, smiling to Captain Jinks as he takes the dog.
You see, you are to have your chance after all.
Aurelia and the detective begin unlocking and arranging the trunks. The detective shows that he is very suspicious of Aurelia and of Captain Jinks. Captain Jinks joins Charlie and Gussie at one side, while Mrs. Greenborough opens the trunks.
Well?
Well, what?
How did you get on?
How do you mean?
Why, with Trentoni. You've had a tremendous advantage over us.
Oh, yes, our bet. That's off. She's too good for that sort of thing.
No, you don't. Look here. Our bet holds good. $1,000 to me if I win, and another 1,000 if you don't.
Nothing of the sort. Both bets are off. They were only a joke and a poor one.
Here, no sneaking. A bet's a bet.
Not when it's an insult to a lady, and I won't permit any action in regard to Madame Trentoni unworthy of the highest woman in the land.
Who appointed you her protector? You've bet me $1,000 you'd make love to her.
Wait.
Gives the dog Camille to Gussie.
I haven't quite 1,000 with me, but
takes card and writes,
I owe you $1,000 for bet in reference to Madame Trentoni. There you are. You understand? There's no bet about anybody's making love to the lady. The bet is off.
Captain Jinks, will you please help us a moment?
Here.
Offering back the dog.
No, you keep Camille.
He joins Aurelia. Gussie to Charlie.
Are you going to let him off?
No, indeed. He's got to stand by his bet with me, and I intend to win. You must help me, Gussie.
How, old fellow?
I've been pumping the old lady on our walk, and she's an even bigger prize than I thought. She's rich as Croesus, and gets a salary for singing that would knock you off your feet, Gussie.
Really? Dear me.
Yes, Jinks doesn't know, and don't tell him. I'm not only going to win my bet with him, I'm going to marry her.
By Jove, you are going it, aren't you?
You help me, and when I've married the lady, I'll pay you all I owe you.
Thanks, old fellow. But suppose Captain Jinks...
He'd never marry her. He belongs to two of the most stuck-up families, north or south, in the country. But if he tries to interfere with me in any way, we'll cook his goose for him all the same.
How? He's such an attractive dog. Don't you think so?
If he gets on the inside track, I'll show him up to her. Say he made a bet with us to marry her on account of her money, and show his IOU for proof.
But he didn't bet that.
What's the odds? You're no Georgie Washington, and you must back me up or lose every cent I owe you.
I suppose I mustn't let myself make a deep impression on her for fear of interfering with you.
Charlie, amused.
You could try your luck. Come along now.
They join the others.
Can we be of any assistance?
Oh, you are. A very great deal with the dogs. I'm really awfully obliged to you. Come along, I'll walk with you to the end of the dock. It's stopped raining, hasn't it?
She turns to go with the two men. The detective has just begun to pitch out the contents of a trunk rather roughly onto the floor. Mrs. Greenborough screams, which stops Aurelia.
Oh, Aurelia, look what he's doing!
Say, old man, is that necessary? Go on, hurry up, get through, and come out and have a drink with me.
The detective, looking at Captain Jinks very suspiciously.
No, thank you.
If you ruin my clothes, I shall sue the city. I warn you of that. Do you take me for an Irish dressmaker with a French name smuggling in her winter models? My dear man, go on. Play hide and seek in every box if you like. Climb down all the corners, use my hats for 10 pins, empty out the shoes, scatter my lingerie to the winds, jump on every stitch I own. And then they call this a free country. Captain Jinks, I leave not my honour, but something much more frail. I leave my wardrobe in your hands. Now, gentlemen.
And turning, she goes out with Charlie and Gussie.
You old ogre, you.
I don't take no interest in women's clothes. I'm just doing my duty.
He throws open a hat box with 3 hats in it, and then begins to empty another trunk. Mrs. Greenborough is busy trying to repack after him.
My word, it's a cruel shame. One would think you expected passengers to swim across the Atlantic like that Lady Godiva, without a stitch on their backs. Another thing, I'm sure it's a great pity, seeing that you're going to display Madame Trentoni's entire wardrobe. We didn't ask those nice young men who gave me a bouquet to stay and take notes for their papers.
The detective goes to a certain trunk. Mrs. Greenborough sees him and rises, crying out,
No, no, you mustn't open that. I really do object now.
The detective, very suspicious.
Oh, you especially object now.
His hand is on the lid.
Kindly give me the key.
Mrs. Greenborough sits on the trunk.
I won't. I appeal to your delicacy as a gentleman. That contains her linen garments and Valenciennes lace.
Sounds very pretty. I must trouble you for the key.
Mrs. Greenborough gives it to him.
Toad.
The detective unlocks and opens the trunk. Professor Belliarti and Mary, Aurelia's maid, enter from the street.
Oh, Professor Belliarti, I'm so pleased you've come back. This dreadful man is making such an exposé of all Aurelia's clothes.
The policeman strolls in again.
That can't be helped, my dear Mrs. Greenborough. Where is Aurelia?
Aurelia, speaking most joyfully from the outside.
I hear a voice! I hear a voice I love!
She rushes in and across the stage into Belliarti's arms, throwing her own about his neck. Mary has gone to the trunks and is putting them in order. She is joined by the policeman, who helps her lock one of the trunks, the keys being in all the locks. When this is done, they stand on one side and talk, both enjoying themselves very much. Mary is pretty, and the policeman is appreciative. The detective is searching through the trunks. Professor Belliarti, with a voice broken with happy emotion and holding Aurelia close in his arms.
God bless my little girl. God bless my little Taglioni. Glad to see her old crow of a father, eh? Bless your pretty eyes, my Fanny Elsler, my little singing bird.
Oh, Papa Belliarti! Oh, Papa Belliarti! Oh!
Gives him 3 big hugs.
I am so glad to see you.
Half crying, half laughing with joy.
It was awful disembarking here without a soul to meet me, a soul I loved, for it's home I've come to after all, isn't it? You've always taught me this was home. I did my best, but I'm afraid I've made dreadful mistakes already and said the wrong things. But I don't care now I've got you.
Choking up again.
I try to be gay, but to tell the truth, I'm so homesick, and all I want is to have a good cry here in your arms.
Breaking down. Captain Jinks stands watching the detective closely. The detective notices this. Captain Jinks gets out his purse and deliberately chooses a few bills and doubles them up, doing it so the detective will see. The detective does see. Only the policeman is blind because he has Mary in his eyes.
That'll be all right now. We have beautiful rooms for you, and they are full of flowers that have been sent, and the rain is over.
And so is mine.
Wiping her eyes.
There, see, the sun's out.
Smiling up at him and holding his hand and linking their arms together.
It really is you. And you are well. Tell me you are well. Of course you are, and as fat as ever.
Belliarti being slender as a reed.
You dear old darling, you. Come, let me introduce you to these gentlemen who have very courteously come to welcome me. Gentlemen, I want to present to you my best friend and foster father, Professor Belliarti. A great artist in dancing, I can tell you that too.
Professor Belliarti, with a quaint, old-fashioned bow.
Gentlemen?
Honored, sir.
Charlie, at same time, bowing.
Very pleased.
Delighted.
Aurelia, to Belliarti.
And now I want you to see my cabin, how nice it was. Come along into the boat.
She leads him toward the gangplank. She sees Mary and the policeman. Aurelia exchanges an amused glance with Belliarti.
Mary!
Mary doesn't hear.
Mary!
Yes, madam.
She blushes. The policeman slides out the big door suddenly.
I only want to remind you, Mary, you are not in London. Let me warn you, as a friend, Mary, that the policemen here are not English.
No, they are Irish, Mary. So look out for Blarney.
And incidentally, Mary, you had better go on with the packing.
Professor Belliarti to the detective.
You don't need to keep Madame Trentoni if the maid stays.
No, sir.
Delightful. Then we can go at once. Come and see my cabin first.
Will one of you gentlemen kindly call a hack?
Oh, please take my landau. My landau's at your disposal.
Aurelia laughing on the gangplank.
But I can't go in the landau of all three.
Oh, yes, you can. It's the same landau.
Then I accept with pleasure.
Papa Belliarti disappears on the ship.
I'll tell the driver to back in.
Goes out to the street. Gussie helps Mrs. Greenborough with a trunk strap. Aurelia on the gangplank.
Oh, Captain Jinks.
Captain Jinks going up to her.
Yes?
Not tomorrow.
No?
No, this afternoon at 4.
Gives him her hand, which he kisses. She also goes on board and out of sight.
This afternoon at 4.
After dreaming a moment, he pulls himself together and beckons to the detective.
1 minute.
Motioning him to one side with him. The detective goes, expecting what is going to happen.
Look here, now it's all right, the lady's all right, and you and I are all right. We understand each other, don't we?
I rather think we do, sir.
Charlie returns.
Good. Rush her things through now and don't bother her any more.
Giving him the bills.
Thank you.
Taking them. He blows his whistle twice as agreed on. The policeman quickly enters.
Officer, I give this man in charge for bribing a United States official.
General consternation. Captain Jinks, dumbfounded.
But...
The policeman linking his arm in Captain Jinks's.
Come along. Don't make trouble now. Come along quietly.
The policeman exits with Captain Jinks. Gussie and Charlie are delighted. The maid is surprised. The detective is satisfied. Aurelia, coming back from the boat.
Wasn't it charming, really? And who will think only 13 days crossing?
Papa Belliarti follows her.
The landau's ready.
A large landau backs on from the street.
Oh, a superb turnout. Come along, Mrs. G.
And as she gets in with Mrs. Greenborough and Belliarti, the two men helping them, and all talking at once. The bouquets are put in too.
Really, gentlemen, you've been superbly kind. Really, I shan't forget it. You know, you're very attractive.
Which one of us is most so?
Aurelia, leaning out and over the side of the carriage.
Impossible to say, you're all so perfectly charming. But where is Captain Jinks?
Oh, he was called away suddenly by most important business.
Tell him not to forget this afternoon at 4.
This afternoon at 4.
Professor Belliarti to the driver.
The Brevoort House.
The landau starts off.
Goodbye, goodbye.
Goodbye, goodbye.
Mrs. Greenborough throws back a bouquet, which Charlie catches, and as the landau passes out of sight, with laughter and goodbyes, the curtain falls. End of Act 1. Act 2, Part 1 of Captain Jinks of the Horse Marines by Clyde Fitch. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Second Act. A fortnight later. Madame Trentoni's private parlor in the Brevoort House. A large room with double folding doors at the back which lead into another and larger room. There are 2 windows on the left side and a door and mantel on the right. The walls are tinted a light, cold, ugly violet with a deep crimson velvet paper border. The furniture is gilt and upholstered with crimson satin with heavy red rope worsted fringe. It is comfortable and warm, especially in the summer. and is not plain but hideous. At the windows are lace curtains with heavy satin lambrequins. There is a piano open by the windows, in one of which is a very small basket with a very large handle, full of roses. There is a marble-topped center table bearing a Bible, a guide to the city, and a silver-plated card receiver. An oval-framed steel engraving called Autumn, a young lady most inappropriately dressed for that season of the year, with curvature of the spine and balancing a prize bunch of grapes on the top of her bare shoulder, hangs on one wall, and on another its companion picture, called Spring, another young lady, only this one evidently a blonde, also sure of the weather and her health, dressed in a veil and a large bunch of buttercups. On the mantel are some dreadful vases, with nice little bouquets in them, and several photographs and some cards. The stage is empty. The hall door at the back near the double doors opens, and a hotel servant shows in Charles La Martine and Augustus Van Vorkenberg. The servant carries a small silver tray.
What names shall I say to Madame Trentoni, gentlemen?
Simply say, 2 gentlemen.
He whistles Champagne Charlie, saunters to a window, and pulling aside the lace curtains, looks out as the servant exits.
She's in, of course. I know that.
Yes, so do I. But I'll bet you she won't receive us. She'll send word she's out.
Gussie, sitting on the sofa and tracing the cabbage roses on the carpet with his cane.
I don't see how she dares again. You don't see Captain Jinks coming up the avenue, do you?
No.
Oh, but he isn't likely to miss a day.
You're sure it's been every day?
Yes, or oftener.
Charlie sits on the piano stool and spins himself around.
And they're seen constantly everywhere together. Last night it was at Niblo's Gardens to see The Black Crook, and they're nearly every day at Maillard's or Delmonico's.
Well, that'll have to let up a bit after tonight when she's begun singing.
You bet. There's not a seat to be had for love or money. They say there's not been such excitement in New York over a debut since Jenny Lind.
Has she been at home one single time you've called?
Not one. And you?
No.
That's all right. Well, it'll end now. If she sees us today, don't you fail to back me up in everything.
I'll do my best. Only, just as I've learned one lie, you change it. It's very confusing.
The servant re-enters.
Shh!
Madame Trentoni cannot say whether she is in or not, unless you send up your cards.
They give the servant their cards, and he again exits. Gussie, examining the photographs on the mantel.
Who bailed Jinks out that day she landed?
Malpason.
Why did he?
Oh, he always liked Captain Jinks. He likes all us good-looking fellows who make things hum at the academy. He was a bully clever chap, that customs detective.
Gussie, looking through the cards in the card receiver.
When does Jinks' case come up in court?
Today.
Today?
Yes, this afternoon.
What time?
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock? Good. It'll ruin his chance with Trentoni.
Don't be an ass. Didn't he get into the scrape to save her inconvenience? It will make a hero of him in her eyes.
Whew, I didn't think of that. Oh, probably he's told her all about it already.
Go west, Fitznoodle. He's too damned modest. Besides, he's clever enough to see that if he told her about it, it would sound infernally like brag and spoil the effect. By the way, you'll have to lend me another 100.
By Jove, that makes a good deal, you know.
Yes, but I must keep up appearances to catch Trentoni, so you must fork over more if you want to get the rest back.
What do you want this 100 for?
For a new Prince Albert and a swallowtail suit. Look here, if she sees us now, this is what I'm going to say to her.
What?
That Jinks bet us he would marry her and would pay his bet out of her money.
But he can deny that.
Let him. We're 2 to 1.
But still...
He made a bet, didn't he? He'll acknowledge that. I never heard him lie in his life. Besides, I have his IOU to prove it, and I intend to arrange things so that he won't know really what he's owning up to. Shh!
The servant re-enters.
Madame Trentoni regrets she is out.
He places their 2 cards on top of the card receiver. There is a knock on the hall door. The servant goes to open it.
Jinks, I'll bet you.
The servant opens the door, and Captain Jinks enters.
Madame Trentoni?
Sees the 2 other men. He is not pleased, and bows coolly to them.
How are you?
Madame Trentoni is out. We've just sent up our cards.
Captain Jinks, giving one of his cards to the servant.
Oh, well, perhaps you didn't have trumps. Try this one.
Yes, sir.
He goes out.
Well, have you worked it up? Your flirtation?
No.
Then what are you doing here?
That's my affair.
If you think you're going to marry this lady...
That's her affair.
I'll be damned if you do.
You will be if I don't, if it's thanks to your interference.
Have you asked her yet?
Not often enough.
Have you any reason to believe she will accept you?
None of your business.
Yes, it is. The business of all 3 of us.
Look here, don't you dare mention that damned wager.
You made it.
I called it off. I lost, if you like. And you have my note. In a week it will be paid up. I know when I made that bet appearances were against me, but this woman has taught me I'm not a fool, nor a blackguard after all. As a fact, I haven't asked her to be my wife yet, but I've come to do so now, because this morning I got some work to do. An honest job. Not very elegant, it wouldn't suit either of you, but it'll earn me a living, and thank God it puts me in a position to ask the woman I love to be my wife.
The servant comes back. To Captain Jinks.
Madame Trentoni will be down in a few minutes.
He exits.
Thank you.
Huh?
Captain Jinks goes to the piano, and with the forefinger of his right hand, picks out, "I'm Captain Jinks of the Horse Marines," playing it with a sort of triumphant force. Charlie, to Gussie.
Come along, we might as well take our cards back.
And going to the card receiver, they take their cards and put them back in their cases.
We may have to economize. Oh, by Jove, I have one of my clever ideas.
The servant goes to the hall door, and opening it, stands ready to show out Charlie and Gussie. Charlie stops to speak to the servant.
Is Professor Belliarti in the hotel?
No, sir. I expect he's at the Academy of Music.
Good. He's our next move.
To Gussie, linking his arm in his.
We'll go there.
They go out. Captain Jinks looks over his shoulder, and seeing them go, changes to "Shoo Fly Don't Bother Me" on the piano, and just as he finishes, Aurelia enters.
Shoo Fly Don't Bother Me? That's a civil greeting.
That was for Lamartine and Van Valkenburg.
Oh, do you know, I don't want to be rude, but I can't bear your friends.
Neither can I.
And by the way, before I forget it, I hope you'll come to supper tonight, here. Will you? After the opera.
Delighted.
No grand powwow, only 1 or 2 distinguished people with the company, and Mapleson and the Ardites. Oh yes, and those 2 nice funny creatures who wanted me to debut in oratorio. They've been most kind to Mrs. G and are to be at Traviata tonight after all. I'll let you sit between them.
There's a prize for a good boy.
Won't you sit down?
Sitting on the piano stool.
Won't you take the chair? Let me sit on the piano stool.
No, indeed, you don't wear a bustle. It's the only comfortable seat for me in the room. It was very kind of you to call this noon. I hoped you would, but...
Captain Jinks pulling his chair nearer her.
But it was an appointment.
Oh, yes, but I can never be certain. You remember our very first appointment you deliberately broke.
You mean that day you landed?
You promised to come to the hotel at 4 o'clock.
Oh, yes, but you forgave me for that long ago, when I told you I was detained, in more senses than one, and very unavoidably, not to mention unwillingly.
But you never told me why.
No, I couldn't, but I will someday. Are you nervous about tonight?
Frightfully.
You'll take the roof off the academy.
I have me doots. I'm not so sure I'm not an acquired taste, like olives and tomatoes and Russian caviar. But tell me one thing.
I'm going to before I leave this room.
He changes his seat to a chair close beside the piano.
Really? What?
No, let's have yours first. When I get started on mine, there won't be time for anything else.
Well, supposing, by some heaven-sent chance, I do succeed, even like in London, then, after I've bowed 32 times with a heaving bosom and thrown kisses like fireworks to the gallery 23 times, if they still keep on, and oh goodness, how I love them when they do, then I sing something, just some little song. Now I want to sing Home Sweet Home. Do you know it?
Oh, yes. Clara Louise Kellogg sings it on the same occasions.
With variations. I have trills and all sorts of monkey tricks.
So has she.
I was afraid so. Well then, I think I'll sing a little song called The Last Rose of Summer.
She sings a bar or two.
Have you heard it?
She sings the verse through.
No?
It's quite new and unhackneyed, isn't it? I sing it in Martha.
Not very lively, though. Why not sing Those Tassels on Her Boots?
I don't know it. Show me.
Getting up from the piano stool, she makes him sit down and sing. Captain Jinks sings one verse, accompanying himself with his forefinger.
Entrancing. Only I don't think the Anti-French Literature League would approve of the sentiment.
Captain Jinks, turning on the stool, rises and speaks seriously.
There would be just one consolation to me if you didn't make a success at all.
You horrid brute. There would be no consolation for me.
That is my misfortune.
Really? How do you mean?
It would make it so much easier for me to ask you to marry me.
A knock on the hall door.
Well then, let's pretend I've failed.
Peter, the newsboy, in the livery of a hotel servant, enters.
Hello, Peter.
Hello, sir.
How do you like your new job?
Oh, it ain't bad.
Aside to Captain Jinks.
I does it for her sake, so as to be near her, but I find it very confining.
What is it, Peter?
Beg pardon, ma'am. The reporter from the Tribune wants to see you on a personal matter of great importance.
Say I'm out.
Yes, ma'am.
Exits.
What a horrid moment to be interrupted in. Please go on just where you left off.
You are very rich and popular and beautiful and all the rest of it.
He stops. Aurelia, childishly happy and delighted.
Oh, that isn't fair, to hurry through with just all the rest of it. I wonder you didn't say I was beautiful, etc. No, sirree, you must enumerate singly every solitary nice thing you think I am.
It would take too long.
How long?
The rest of my life.
Starting to embrace her. Another knock on the hall door. They start apart and sit on opposite sides of the table. Then Aurelia speaks.
Come in.
Peter re-enters.
Please, ma'am, the reporter from the Tribune told me to ask you, so long as he was dead set on being out, if the news is true that has come to his office that he was engaged to be married to him.
Pointing to Captain Jinks. Aurelia, on one side of the table.
It won't be true if he keeps on interrupting with messages all the day. You tell the gentleman, Peter, that I've gone to the academy.
Captain Jinks, on the other side of the table.
And if he asks you anything about me, tell him you don't know who I am.
Oh, but I can't.
Why not?
'Cause I've just told him you've been to see Madame Trentoni every day.
What did you do that for?
For $1.
That's a nice return to make to Madame Trentoni for getting you this good position in a high-toned hotel.
If you wanted me to lie about it, you ought to have told me. Thought it was something she'd be proud of.
That's all right, Peter. Go give my message and don't answer any more questions about me at all.
Yes, ma'am.
Exits.
Peter wasn't so far wrong. I'm not ashamed of your visits.
Captain Jinks rises and goes to her.
Look here, I'm not worth your little finger, but if you'll only overlook my beastly unworthiness and just let my love for you count, I'll do my best so long as I live to make my wife the happiest woman in the world.
But I'm nobody.
The woman I love? Nobody?
But your family, your mother.
You are the woman I love.
Still, I mayn't be the woman your mother loves.
Oh, well, say, are you marrying mother or me?
But won't your mother be shocked that you're marrying a lady on the stage?
Oh, very likely she'll carry on awful for a while. The Ladies' Anti-French Literature League is broad-minded compared to mother, but she's an angel all the same, and as birds of a feather flock together, she will soon chum up with you when she has once had a chance to know you.
I'm not so sure. She'll think you are going to perdition.
Oh no, to a much hotter place. But when she knows you...
You think so because you think you are in love with me.
Think?
Aurelia, rising.
It would break my heart to come between you and your mother.
Now don't be selfish. It will break mine if you refuse me, and you'd rather break your heart than mine, wouldn't you?
Coming close to her. Aurelia, teasing and backing slowly away.
Oh, I don't know.
Captain Jinks, following her.
Madame Trentoni, oh, can't I call you something else? Something more friendly, more personal.
Yes, you may call me Miss Johnson. That's my real name, you know.
But you have another, a nearer one.
Oh, well, go on with Miss Johnson for a few minutes.
Captain Jinks makes her let him take her hand.
Listen to me seriously. This is a question for you and me to decide. Let's decide it now. Do you know that until I met you, I was a lazy, good-for-nothing loafer? Now I'm afraid I'm not good for much, but I'm no longer lazy, and I'm a lover instead of a loafer. Let me work for you, will you? It's no fun working only for myself. Make my dreams come true, just to prove the rule that they don't.
There are dreams and dreams.
Yes, but mine are all alike, daydreams and all, full of one idea, one desire. Your love. I can't express myself. I don't know how to say it, but what I mean is that I don't want to go anywhere, on sea, on land, in the city, in the country, anywhere, unless you are there beside me. Life without you doesn't seem worth the trouble. Oh, if I only dared hope you could care a little for a chap like me.
Aurelia, softening and with bent head, looks at him sweetly from the corner of her eye.
I give you permission to dream that.
Really?
Yes, and you can even make the little a good deal...
You...
Interrupted. He is going to say, darling.
Wait a minute. You know I'm not really half so nice as you think I am.
Aren't you?
No, but it won't make any difference if you never find it out. Only, suppose I were to fail tonight.
Ah, that's just what I meant by having one consolation. You would know then I loved you only for your dear self, and if you loved me, we could say, never mind, for love doesn't fail.
Aurelia, with tears in her eyes.
You are a darling.
A knock on the hall door. They change their places quickly. Captain Jinks sits again on one side of the center table, and Aurelia on the other. They exchange a smiling glance of understanding as Aurelia says,
Come in.
Peter enters.
Ice water.
He rattles the ice in a white china pitcher, which he places between them on the center table. Aurelia and Captain Jinks exchange hopeless glances.
The chambermaid wants to know if she can come in and do the room now.
No, she can't.
She goes to the writing desk and writes in ink with the wrong end of a pen on a big sheet of fresh white blotting paper there. Captain Jinks, taking Peter to one side by the collar of his coat.
Look here, if you bring any more messages or ice water or reporters or chambermaids or any other damned thing to Madame Trentoni this afternoon, I'll break your neck. Do you understand?
No, sir.
Well, think it over as you go downstairs.
What's it worth?
Your neck, that's all. Go on, get.
Yes, sir.
Halfway to the door, he stops.
Say, I'll bet you a quarter no one gets into this room what ain't wanted.
All right.
Thank you.
He exits, happy. Aurelia follows him to the door with the blotting paper, which she holds in front of her, displaying it to Captain Jinks.
There. How would it do if I put this on the door?
The paper reads in large black letters, Engaged.
It would be all right if you would add, to our Jinks.
Oh, how dare you? Certainly not.
Why?
Because...
Closing the door, she turns and faces him.
Because...
She comes slowly to him.
Because it's the truth.
Captain Jinks embracing her.
You love me?
In his arms, she doesn't answer.
Do you love me?
Still in his arms, she doesn't answer.
You don't answer.
Aurelia, looking up at him.
Am I trying to get out of your arms?
Darling.
Yours.
She bursts into tears. Captain Jinks, frightened.
Dearest, what's the matter? You are crying.
I know it. I'm so happy.
Papa Belliarti comes in unannounced. He brings with him his violin in a green baize bag.
Bless my stars and ballet dancers. Ought I have knocked?
Aurelia and Captain Jinks have broken quickly from each other's arms.
Oh no, we are accustomed to interruptions this morning.
Papa Belliarti to Aurelia.
Having a little rehearsal with the new tenor, my dear?
Placing the bag on the piano, busy with his violin.
Yes, sort of like that.
The ladies of the ballet are here to rehearse at your request, you know.
Oh dear, that's true. I forgot. You'll have to excuse me, Captain Jinks.
Captain Jinks bows to Aurelia and, turning to Professor Belliarti, offers him a cigar.
Have a cigar?
Thank you.
Takes one and puts it in his pocket.
Ahem.
Turning his back, pointedly, he takes up his violin, which is in perfect tune, and tunes it, with a smile on his face, but only his friendly back toward Aurelia and Captain Jinks. Captain Jinks to Aurelia.
Shan't I tell him?
I think he'd rather I told him. He's such a dear, sensitive old thing.
And then afterwards I will ask his consent. Don't you think that would please him?
Oh, yes, do. It will make him feel he's something to both of us. How nice of you to have the idea. Come back in 1/4 of an hour.
It's 1 o'clock. I'll be back on the minute of 15 past. But I won't be able to stay, for I have an engagement at 2 that must not be put off.
Aurelia, happy and smiling.
Oh, I'll excuse you.
Captain Jinks, stopping and looking into her eyes a moment.
This is no dream. You're sure I'm awake?
Let's see.
She looks around first at Papa Belliarti, whom she sees still has his back turned, and then, leaning over, she kisses Captain Jinks.
How is it? Awake?
Not sure yet. Try again.
No, sirree. Goodbye.
Giving him her hand, which he presses.
Goodbye.
He starts to go. At the door he hesitates and stands looking at Aurelia. She slowly joins him at the door, questioningly.
Are you sure whether you're awake or not?
Quite sure. But I may be uncertain in 15 minutes.
Don't ask Papa Belliarti, then. I'll be back.
Exits.
Papa Belliarti?
Professor Belliarti, with his back still turned.
Has he gone?
Yes, you silly old goose.
Going to him, takes him lovingly by the shoulders.
Turn around.
So my singing bird is caught at last, eh?
She hides her happy, blushing face in his arms.
I'm very glad.
He speaks this latter sentence with tears in his voice and eyes.
Very glad for her sake. But I'll miss you, little girl.
It isn't to make any difference to you at all. Let me tell you...
Shh, not now. Mrs. G is coming. I sent for her to accompany me on the piano for the ballet ladies.
Mrs. Greenborough enters at this moment through the double doors at back.
Good afternoon, everybody. Papa Belliarti sent for me, Aurelia, to...
I told her, madame.
Mrs. Greenborough, looking around room, under the sofa, behind the chairs, and even absent-mindedly on the piano and mantelpiece.
Aurelia, I can't find my bustle anywhere. I believe that chambermaid has stolen it.
Dear heart, if you had any more bustle, I don't know where you'd put it.
Oh, well, of course I had to have a makeshift, so I took all those nice newspapers that had our arrival in.
You both know why I've had these dancers come. I want everything tonight as near perfection as possible. No rough edges, no horrid slip-ups. And the dancing at yesterday's rehearsal was awful. How many ladies are coming, Papa?
7. The leads.
Good. If they're all right, the others can't go wrong. I have a special reasons, besides it being my New York debut, why I want everything tonight to be perfect. Haven't I, Papa Belliarti? Shall I tell her, Papa?
Mrs. Greenborough, curious.
Well now, Aurelia, I consider you're real tantalising if you have secrets.
If you keep on talking, dear heart, I can never tell you.
Talking? Me? It's 20 years since I've spoken one complete sentence of any length all the way through.
Well, then, to make up, I'll tell you. Stand over there.
Placing her.
Lean against the table so as to have some support if you should feel faint. There.
Having bolstered Mrs. Greenborough against the center table, she crosses the room to Papa Belliarti and takes his arm. They stand facing Mrs. Greenborough. Professor Belliarti hums a few bars of the Mendelssohn Wedding March, and they slowly approach Mrs. Greenborough.
Good gracious, I hope.
Shh! Papa Belliarti and I are very happy.
What?
Well, aren't you?
Yes, dear. Yes, of course, only...
Do go on. I'm eaten up with curiosity. I'm guessing...
You're guessing wrong. I'm going to be married.
Bless my soul. To Papa Belliarti?
That's a crazy idea.
No, go on with your guessing. Who is it?
Dear heart, I can't guess.
Catch me and I'll tell you.
She runs, gaily laughing, around the table, then around a big armchair, and then around Papa Belliarti, Mrs. Greenborough running after her and talking all the time. Aurelia dodges around Papa Belliarti, turns suddenly, and herself catches Mrs. Greenborough and gives her a hug and a kiss. Then she drags her over to the piano, plumps her down on the piano stool facing the keys, and leaning over her back with her own hands on the piano plays Captain Jinks.
Now, can't you guess?
Mrs. Greenborough gives a little high scream of delight.
Oh, it's the young man who gave me the bookie the day we landed.
Aurelia, hugging her delightedly around the neck.
Of course. Do you suppose there is another man in this whole world I'd marry?
I thought he liked us that very day.
I'm so happy. I'm no prima donna now. I'm only a girl, and the happiest girl that ever was. Listen, you two dear people think I've been singing these last 2 years, don't you? Wait till you hear me tonight. You'll say I never sang before. There's only one man in this world for me, and I'm going to marry him.
She hugs Professor Belliarti impulsively.
What do you think of that for real joy?
There is a knock on the hall door.
Come in, everybody.
Peter enters.
Please, ma'am, there's a party of females says they has an engagement with you. I thought they were kidding, so I wouldn't let them in till I asked you.
The ballet ladies.
Show them up, Peter. They're artistes.
They're right here.
He calls into hall.
Come along in.
And goes out after they have entered. The 7 ballet ladies enter. 3 are young and pretty. 3 are about 50. One of these 3 is rather stout and one is very thin. The 7th is inclined to embonpoint also, but bravely restricted at every curve. She hails from the Paris Opera. The thin one is a widow and wears a widow's weeds. Her dress is a trifle short and shows a hair's breadth escape of white stocking above her prunella boots. She brings with her, leading by the hand, a small child. Her offspring is dressed in white piqué and wears pantalettes and galoshes. They all say, "Good day." 2 of the younger ones are rather free and impertinent in their manner. The others are somewhat embarrassed. All carry little bags or parcels supposed to contain their ballet dresses. The widow's is done up in an old newspaper.
How do you do, ladies?
They all bow and murmur again a greeting.
Madame Trentoni wants to have the performance perfection tonight, and so she thought a little quiet rehearsal of the principal ladies of the ballet here, with her, a good thing all around.
You did beautifully last night, but you know this new rose figure Professor Belliarti is teaching you is very difficult, and if there is the slightest mistake it is ruined.
There is a nervous movement of all the 7, several clearing their throats, others slightly changing their position from one foot to the other. 1 or 2, including the widow, look very supercilious, as if to say,
"Oh, dear me. Think of her telling us what is and what ain't easy. Ha! Us, who are old enough to be her grandmother."
Though I'm sure they wouldn't have put it in just that way. They would probably have spoken of her as
raw amateur,
and of themselves as
trained artistes.
Professor Belliarti, opening the folding doors at the back, shows the big empty room.
We may use this room too, if we need, to dance in.
The ballet ladies look in its direction.
We're all going to try our very best, aren't we, tonight?
The 3rd ballet lady, with a curtsy.
Si, signora.
The 6th ballet lady, the widow.
Oh, it'll be all right. There ain't no trouble with that polka step.
Dat was nicht ein polka step.
The 1st ballet lady, Miss Pettitos.
Yes, it was.
Nein, nein, I tell you, dat was ein...
Ladies?
Dat was nicht ein polka step.
Miss Hochspitz is always quarreling, sir. That's why she had to leave Germany and come over here.
Och, Hamil, dat was not true, mynheer. She is von Cat, des Caroline Pettitos.
Come, Fraulein. Remember, I always insist on my ballet being a happy family.
Miss Hochspitz pinches Miss Pettitos. Miss Pettitos slaps Miss Hochspitz's face. All the ballet ladies join in, and there's a general quarrel.
Ladies, please do remember we engage you to dance, not to sing. We'll do all the squabbling ourselves. You have some things with you to rehearse in.
Oh, yes, miss. We've all got combing jackets and our regular rehearsing costumes the rest of the way down.
They all show their bundles.
Where'll they change?
In here.
Motioning to the big room at back.
No, let them come to my room.
They can't go through the hall after they're dressed.
They don't have to. That door to the right,
pointing off in the big room,
opens into a private passage which connects straight with my room. It's the way I always come.
Very well then, ladies, please, if you will kindly go with Mrs. Greenborough.
Follow me. Come along, right this way. Watch out for that vase.
She leads the way, talking, followed by the 7 ballet ladies, the widow still leading her child. Belliarti closes the door after them. Then he comes slowly to Aurelia, watching her with a sweet smile. When he reaches her, he takes her 2 hands.
I'm as happy as you, my dear. There's only one worry. Is he worthy of you?
He's worth a dozen of me, voice and all.
Professor Belliarti, sitting in the big armchair by the table.
Still, He is all the time with one gay company of young men who lead what you call very quick lives. So let old Papa Belliarti poke about a little and ask a few questions before you make the engagement public, will you?
If you want to, you will be proud, I know, of all you hear. Women, dear papa, are perfect barometers for a good and bad man.
She sits on the floor at his feet and lays her head on his knees.
And nothing gets out of order like a barometer. They're always pointing to fair weather when it's raining cats and dogs.
Aurelia, laughing.
True, but when you hear me sing tonight, you'll acknowledge that I am in perfect condition.
Professor Belliarti, leaning over and putting his arm about her neck.
I hope so. And I hope your new life, my dear, will be one long happy dance. Not the new-fangled step, this polka radoa, for that is a love at first sight that will die a violent death, exhausted before the honeymoon is over. Not the waltz, for a waltz with us must need have some reverses, and I want no reverses in my little girl's life. Not a Virginia reel, for that entails long separations from one's partner, and a flirtatious swinging of all the men down the line. But I would have your life's dance the minuet, which is not so fast as to tire you out, whose music is Mozart's, our best, a dance where you and your partner are never long separated, and where you mingle with your amusements a certain graceful graciousness towards each other, which will keep familiarity forever from breeding contempt.
Aurelia, with a choke in her voice.
Our life shall be a minuet, dear father, and you must teach us both our steps.
End of Act 2, Part 1. Act 2, Part 2 of Captain Jinks of the Horse Marines by Clyde Fitch. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Second Act, Part 2. A knock on the hall door. Professor Belliarti, rising.
Come in.
Aurelia also rises. Peter enters.
Two lardy-da gents to see you, and an old lady for you, ma'am.
Giving cards to Professor Belliarti and one to Aurelia. Professor Belliarti, reading his cards.
Mr. Charles La Martine and Mr. Van Valkenburg.
Them's the two always finds Madame Trentoni. They've been to the theatre after you, and they says it's important.
Aurelia, with suppressed happiness and proudly.
See who my visitor is.
Shows Papa Belliarti her card. Professor Belliarti, reading card.
Who is it? His mother?
Must be. Come all ready to congratulate me. He never even told me she was here, and we were both rather afraid of her.
Well, are you out to them gents too?
No. Show them to my room, and say I'll be with them immediately.
Peter, to Aurelia.
And the old party?
Show the distinguished lady here at once.
Gee.
And with his tongue in his cheek, he exits.
And she'll be a proud mother when she sees you. I hope to be back in time to be presented to her.
Aurelia, half teasing.
I don't know if she'll approve of you, Papa. She's against acting.
Dancing is a higher art.
So it is sometimes.
They both laugh.
Margaret Fuller and Ralph Waldo Emerson were once discussing Fanny Elsler. It is not dancing, Margaret, it is poetry, said Emerson. My dear Ralph, backspoke Miss Fuller, it's not poetry, it's religion.
A delicate knock is heard on the hall door. Aurelia, a little frightened.
There she is.
Professor Belliarti opens the door, bowing low. Mrs. Jinks enters. Professor Belliarti, bowing, goes out, closing the door after him. Mrs. Jinks is an elderly, sweetly severe, delicate-featured little woman, dressed in rich, light brown silk, but in a past fashion. She wears full spreading skirts and carries a small parasol to match her dress. Mrs. Jinks, inclining her head with a serious, dignified grace.
Madame Trentoni?
Aurelia, with a low curtsy.
Yes, madam. You have heard?
Mrs. Jinks bows her head in acquiescence.
How good of you to come so soon. Oh, I must kiss you.
Please don't.
Aurelia, kissing her.
I do so want you to love me.
Mrs. Jinks, like a stone statue when she is kissed, and showing no flurry.
Forgive me, but I extremely dislike demonstrative people.
I'm so sorry. Will you sit down?
Thank you. I would rather stand.
Aurelia looks up, frightened.
I am afraid the reason for my visit is not a pleasant one. By all means, however, sit down yourself.
Aurelia, at once on the defensive.
Oh, no, I shall stand if you do.
My son does not know yet of my arrival, but I received a letter from him the other day, stating he intended asking you to marry him. I've not slept since.
I regret that your night's rest has been disturbed.
Hoping to reach you before he takes so fatal a step, to assure you such a thing is impossible, I took the first train.
I'm afraid you took a slow one, for you are too late.
He's already proposed?
And been accepted. Not half an hour ago.
Mrs. Jinks closes her eyes as if she were going to faint and sinks into a chair.
Don't please take it so to heart, please.
Pardon me, I don't mean to be rude. This marriage cannot take place. You must give him up.
It is quite impossible. I am no Camille, madam.
Sitting determinedly at the opposite side of the table.
No what?
No Marguerite Gautier.
I do not know the lady.
Oh, she wouldn't move in your set. But don't you remember the scene in the play Camille where she gives up the lover to satisfy his father? It ruined both their lives.
I never go to the theatre.
That's a pity, because I am sure if you did, you would not be giving us both this painful experience. Well, I am a good woman, Mrs. Jinks, and I love your son.
You are also an actress, I believe.
Well, there's a difference of opinions about that, but I am an opera singer, and not ashamed of it.
The Jinkses have never been connected with any profession except the church.
Every little while the church and stage come plump together like that, and I think it does them both good.
The Jinkses are an old and distinguished family. And yours?
I'm doing my honest best to make it distinguished.
But you must acknowledge the thing you threaten doing isn't done. Your bringing up, your lives, everything is at a variance. Happiness is impossible.
I disagree with you so long as our hearts are in accord.
Listen, my brother has nearly arranged for a magnificent diplomatic position for my son, his nephew, in the event of Greeley's election, which is certain, of course. This marriage with you will make such a career impossible, ruin his chances, shatter all our hopes for the future.
Aurelia, rising.
Madam, I am not much more than a girl, but really—
You look very young, but they say you stage women do wonderful things with your cosmetics.
When I am a certain age, I may resort to them.
Mrs. Jinks rises, offended.
You do not realize what sort of a woman you are speaking to. As I started to say, I am young, but I have a will of my own and a heart of my own, in which your son has told me his happiness lies. Loving him as I do, and believing in him, I shall not think of insulting his manhood by proposing to release him from his engagement.
You will separate me from my son?
Aurelia goes a little nearer her.
No, indeed. I will share him with you. His mother's love remains yours.
I have not yet seen my son. I shall appeal to the mother love you speak of.
Starting to go.
May I give you a hint? Don't say horrid things about me, for if he's the man I think him, that would only steel his heart against you.
He's cried his baby troubles out on my knees, and his boy's sorrows out in my arms. He shall empty his man's heart into my arms too.
Dear me, if he does that, I'm afraid you'll find them rather full, for I was all his man's heart held half an hour ago.
You are frivolous. Goodbye, madam.
No, don't go like that.
Will you give my boy up?
No.
Mrs. Jinks makes an inclination of the head. She is about to exit, but meets Professor Belliarti coming in. Professor Belliarti is very excited, which feeling he tries to control on seeing Mrs. Jinks.
Oh, Papa Belliarti, I'm glad you've come down. I want to present to you Mrs. Jinks, my future husband's mother. Mrs. Jinks, Professor Belliarti, my foster father and the ballet master of our opera company.
Professor Belliarti bows low. Mrs. Jinks closes her eyes, then, giving the merest inclination of her head, she exits. Aurelia, excited, slams the door after her.
She came after my happiness, but she didn't get it. Tell Mrs. Greenborough to bring the ladies in now.
Not yet, not yet. Papa Belliarti is after your happiness too, but to save it for you. To save it for you.
What is it? What's the matter? No accident?
You mustn't marry this Captain Jinks.
You too?
He's a blackguard.
Papa, that's not true. How dare you?
Professor Belliarti pours forth a flood of Italian, speaking rapidly and with great excitement and emotion. Aurelia stops him, taking hold of his arm and holding it tightly but affectionately.
Speak English, speak English. You know I can't understand Italian when you are excited. What do you mean? Does he, like his mother, want to back out?
Oh no, not he. Not he.
Then how dared you call him...
He is marrying you for your money, for what you will make for him.
I don't believe it.
He made one bet he would marry you after these young men told him they had heard from Mrs. G that you were rich. He made one bet with Lamartine and Van Valkenburg that he would marry you.
I tell you, I don't believe it.
$1,000 he bet them. Even Mapleson knows it.
Papa, you didn't tell Mapleson?
He heard it from a reporter.
It's in the papers.
No, the reporter is a nice gentleman. He was told by a newsboy on the dock the day you landed, but never printed it.
But I don't believe the story. I tell you, it isn't true. Captain Jinks never made such a bet.
I have proof, and I intend to ask him to his face.
Yes, do that, Papa. I'm not afraid of his answer.
But if he says he did bet so?
Don't let him say it.
I will make him speak the truth. If he confesses he did make that bet, you must not marry him. He would break your heart, darling, before the honeymoon was over.
A knock on the hall door, but neither hear it.
Oh no, it's too great an insult. I know he isn't capable.
Another knock, and then Peter enters.
Please, are you all deaf? Captain Jinks is here again and says they're all expecting him, but I wouldn't let him up till I asked it.
Send Captain Jinks straight here.
Yes, sir. Golly.
Exits.
I couldn't ask him.
You needn't. But will you give me permission to break off your engagement?
If it's true, but I know it isn't.
Professor Belliarti, pointing to the room at the back.
Go in there. Listen to what we say, and when it is sufficient in your eyes to break off everything between us, make some signal. Drop this book.
Taking a book from the table. Aurelia, going to the door, she turns there.
Ask him outright if he made the bet, and be sure he says no loud.
She goes into the other room and closes the doors behind her.
If wishing could only make him turn out to be worthy of my girl.
A knock on the hall door. He pulls himself together.
Come in.
Captain Jinks dashes in, very happy and expectant.
Ah, sir, the very man I wanted to see.
And me too.
I have a most important question to ask you.
Me too.
Have a cigar?
Offering one.
No, thank you. And here's the one back you gave me a little while ago.
Giving the cigar from his pocket. Captain Jinks, taking the cigar, rather perplexed and not understanding.
Have a chair?
Offering one and about to sit himself.
No.
Captain Jinks, about to sit down, doesn't.
Ah, well then, straight to the point, Signor Belliarti.
Bowing elaborately, mocking, happy.
Will you give me your adopted daughter to be my wife?
Yes, if you will give me your word of honor you didn't sign that paper.
Giving him, with trembling hand, the paper Captain Jinks signed in Act 1.
What paper?
Taking paper from Belliarti, aghast.
By Jove, my IOU! How did you get hold of this?
Good Lord, you know what it is? Then you did sign it. You're a blackguard, sir, to try and cheat my child.
Captain Jinks throws the paper onto the table.
Hold on a minute, hold on. You're an old man, and I can't treat you as I would a younger, but you must take that blackguard back.
Never. If it is true you made this wager about my little girl, forget my age if you like, but I won't take blackguard back.
Yes, you will if it's a lie. Where is Madame Trentoni? I want to see her herself.
First answer me my question. Is that your signature? Did you make that wager?
Captain Jinks, after a moment's pause, ashamed.
Yes.
Again a moment's pause. The book is dropped by Aurelia in the next room and is distinctly heard as it strikes the floor. The sound rouses Captain Jinks and Professor Belliarti.
But...
Not one other word, sir. I am asked by Madame Trentoni to take back the troth she plighted with you, and to tell you that all is forever over between you.
I won't have that. I can explain.
Explain? Your signature explains too much already.
I don't acknowledge you or your authority. I'll see the lady herself.
Not with my permission.
Stepping in front of him.
Without it, then. I tell you I won't take your word for it. She herself gave me her promise, and she herself must break it.
I don't believe she'll ever willingly set eyes on you again.
She must, I tell you. It's an outrage. It's a conspiracy.
There you are right. A damnable conspiracy against a sweet woman. A contemptible insult to as lovely a girl as lives. Goodbye.
I won't leave this room till I've seen her.
Yes, you will.
I will not.
Then the police would be called in to remove you, and you would add, to what you have already done, a public scandal for Madame Trentoni on the eve of her debut.
On the eve of her debut? No, I mustn't do that. Listen, about that bet.
Not one further word about it. The paper speaks for itself. Goodbye.
Captain Jinks seizes the leaf and tears it angrily.
That for your damned paper. You shall dance at our wedding yet, Papa Belliarti.
Going to the door.
It will be the dance macabre, then.
Captain Jinks, turning at the door.
Wait and see. I'm aware who's at the bottom of this, and I'll find them both before the afternoon is over. And I'll make you glad to take that blackguard back. You don't know me.
He exits.
I wish to God we didn't.
He sinks into the armchair beside the table. The double doors at the back room open slowly, and Aurelia steals in. She is a tearful, tragic, woebegone-looking creature.
Gone?
Yes.
Aurelia, coming up behind his chair.
Didn't you hear me drop the book a second time?
No, what was that for?
To hint perhaps I had better see him after all, just to hear what excuse he had to make.
No, my dear, better not.
Why didn't he lie about it? Why did he own he made it?
His case was desperate. Come, you must be strong now and hold up your head.
I can't, Papa. My head is as heavy as my heart.
Sitting on his lap and throwing her arms about his neck, she sobs.
And I shan't sing tonight. You mustn't ask me. I can sing a note.
Not make your debut tonight?
Aurelia, her tears gone.
No, you can send word to Mapleson. You can do what you please.
Leaving his knee, she paces up and down the room.
I will not sing tonight. Don't you know what I told you a little while ago? That I was so happy I would sing as I never sang before. Well, I was wrong.
Beginning to cry again.
What I should have said was, I will be so miserable, so utterly unhappy that I'll never sing another note.
She sits on the piano stool and buries her tearful face in her arms over the keys. Professor Belliarti, really alarmed.
My dear child, my dear.
Going to her.
Where's your character? You can't give way like this. Your whole future's at stake.
Aurelia, sobbing.
I don't want any future.
Professor Belliarti pulls the bell rope.
You must think of Mapleston, too. You haven't the right to sacrifice him.
He can say I have a cold.
No one will believe it.
Moving the chairs from the center of the room back against the wall.
And the public will be down on you.
Why doesn't someone invent a new kind of cold that people will believe you when you've got it?
Peter enters in answer to the bell.
Yes, sir.
Help me to move this table.
Yes, sir.
They move the center table out of the way and to the opposite side of the room from Aurelia. Professor Belliarti, aside to Peter.
Listen. Go downstairs to the two black gentlemen you will find smoking in my room and ask them to wait a little longer. Say I may want them to apologize to Madame Trentoni before they leave the hotel.
All right, sir.
Say nothing to anyone, but watch this bell downstairs. You'll be paid for it, and if I pull 3 hard separate rings, bring the 2...
The word sticks in his throat, and he has to swallow before he can speak it.
Gentlemen here at once.
Yes, sir.
Goes to the hall door.
And tell Mrs. Greenborough we are ready.
Yes, sir.
Exits. Aurelia, rising.
What, do you think I can go through their dance with those women now?
Professor Belliardi, putting his arm about her.
Yes, I asked you to do it, dear.
No, no. And what for? I tell you, I shan't sing tonight.
Dear girl, you must. Pull yourself together, if only for my sake.
Pop, I can't. My heart is really breaking.
Professor Belliardi moves the rest of the furniture out of the way, so as to leave the center of the room free to the dancers. Aurelia leans against the piano.
Don't let him see it. Don't let these 3 blackguard men know how hardly you take it. Let your pride save you. Be a woman.
I am one, and that's why my heart is breaking.
Be a man, then, and don't let Jinks win.
Mrs. Greenborough and the ballet ladies come volubly through the double doors. The ballet ladies are dressed in old tights, with discarded tarlatan skirts and combing jackets. Several keep on their hats, and the widow has not removed her bonnet and veil.
My love, I thought you'd never send for us. Whatever in the world...
You stop chattering, Mrs. G, and get to the work at the piano. What can you play?
Mrs. Greenborough seating herself at piano.
I know the ballet out of Robert the Devil.
Professor Belliardi humming a line to see if the time is right.
That will do.
He turns to the 6th Ballet Lady, the widow, who still holds her child's hand.
Did you have to bring that child?
Yes, sir. I couldn't leave her home, sir. But she's as good as gold. Never stirs a hair nor breathes a syllabub.
She takes the child to the sofa, and lifting her up in her 2 hands, plumps her down into the corner hard. Here the child remains, without moving or speaking. Mrs. Meggitt kisses the child and then turns to Professor Belliardi.
Please, sir, I wishes you'd take me out of the 2nd row and put me in the front. I don't show it all behind, and I'm a poor widow, and my legs is all I've got.
You forget the old adage, Mrs. Meggitt. Distant lends enchantment. Come now, ladies.
Professor Belliardi gets his violin and bow ready. The other ballet ladies stand and loll about. The 1st ballet lady sits comfortably in a chair. The 2nd ballet lady sits on the arm of this chair and arranges the straps of her slippers. The 3rd ballet lady leans against the wall, believing that the world is hers. The 4th ballet lady keeps rubbing the soles of her slippers up and down on the carpet to see that it is not too slippery. The 5th ballet lady fidgets with her dress and her waist, etc. The 6th ballet lady practices her steps, and the 7th ballet lady pirouettes on one toe and throws imaginary kisses.
I wish, Miss Pettidos, you will not push me in der waist with your elbows so sharp.
If you'd keep your big feet in your own place and not keep dancing on mine, there wouldn't be any trouble.
Oh, Immel, I dance besser as you mit your Chinese does.
Sauerkraut. Buh.
Sticking out her tongue at her German sister artiste. The latter devotee of Terpsichore responds with an even more unladylike grimace. This leads to an immediate general imbroglio among all the excitable coryphees, the 7 dividing themselves into rival factions. Professor Belliardi, after several ineffectual efforts to make himself heard, goes in amongst them, at no little personal risk, and, aided by Mrs. Greenborough, manages to separate the two principal, somewhat draggled, and highly flushed contestants. Professor Belliardi, striking his violin with his bow.
Attention, ladies, please.
There is a general movement. Those sitting rise.
Let us rehearse the pas de rose in the first act.
He goes to Aurelia.
Make an effort, dearie. Speak to them. Tell them what you want.
No, you tell them. I can't.
The ballet ladies go to a large bundle of artificial roses placed on a table in the corner, and each takes one. Mrs. Pettitos snatches her flower from Miss Hawkspitz's hand. There is an awful moment, but the widow pours oil on the waters, and quiet is preserved.
An elaborate ballet in this opera has not been done in America before, and we want it to be perfect.
The ballet ladies take their positions. Aurelia starts to leave the room. Professor Belliardi stops her.
Let me go to my room.
No, dearie, please stay. Don't let these women see you are in trouble. Are you ready, Mrs. G?
Good gracious, I've been.
Very good. Ready, please.
He and Mrs. Greenborough begin playing.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
The ballet ladies begin their dance, Professor Belliardi leading and directing them, dancing with them, showing them, correcting them. After a minute, he speaks aside to Aurelia.
Try and watch them, dear.
He continues with the dance, but again, a few minutes later, he stops and speaks to her, the ballet always continuing without him.
Be brave, little girl. You have your life before you. And if the fellow's worthless, why let him spoil it?
That's perfectly true, only...
Keep only one idea now in your mind, your appearance tonight.
I'll try.
That's my brave girl. Look at that silly creature.
Directing her attention to one of the ballet ladies, he tries to excite her interest in the dancers.
They're doing very badly. What do you think?
Aurelia, watching them.
How atrocious! They aren't ballet girls, they're 10-pins.
The first movement of the ballet is finished. Professor Belliardi, urging her,
Show them. That's the only way they will learn.
No, I can't, not now. Who dances the solo?
Professor Belliardi to the ballet ladies.
The pas seul, please.
All but the fourth and first ballet ladies retire and take seats. The fourth ballet lady comes forward.
No, Miss Hochspitz, not the next figure. The pas seul, Miss Pettitos.
The first ballet lady laughs.
Hochspitz doing a solo? A cabbage by any other name would smell as sweet.
She gracefully kicks a satirical kiss to her with her right foot.
Blue Danube, please.
The third ballet lady to the first ballet lady.
Shh.
Professor Belliardi, who has taken the first ballet lady to one side.
Dance badly, very badly.
The first ballet lady insulted.
Badly?
Yes, it will be all right. I have a reason.
The first ballet lady dances not very well. Professor Belliardi watches Aurelia, who remains indifferent. Professor Belliardi to the first ballet lady.
That isn't bad enough. Dance worse.
I can't.
Try.
The first ballet lady, still dancing.
I'm afraid I'll lose my job.
You will if you don't do as I ask.
Oh, all right.
She dances very badly. Professor Belliarti to Aurelia.
Now do watch, dear.
Aurelia, noticing.
But that girl's awful.
Professor Belliarti to Aurelia.
Show her.
No.
But she rises and pins up one side of her dress. Professor Belliarti to the 1st Ballet Lady.
Go on. Worse.
He goes to the bell rope and pulls 3 distinct times. The 1st Ballet Lady dances a pas seul vilely.
She's wrong. She's all wrong.
Pinning up the other side of her dress. Professor Belliarti to the 1st Ballet Lady.
You're wrong again.
The music stops.
Wrong?
Show her, dear. Show her.
It's simple as daylight. Give me a rose.
Seizing her rose from Miss Pettitos.
That's right.
Striking up on his violin.
Now watch Madame Trentoni.
Mrs. Greenborough begins playing again. Aurelia dancing.
1, 2, 3.
Professor Belliarti always playing.
Do you see the difference, Miss Pettitos?
Aurelia dancing.
Not as if you were made of wood. Papa, I wish I were.
Stopping dancing as if she couldn't do it.
Careful.
Peter enters, showing in Gussie and Charlie.
Mr. Lamartine, Mr. Van Valkenburg.
The music stops again.
What?
Professor Belliarti to Aurelia.
Your pride.
Charlie coming forward.
We have come, Madame Trentoni, to apologize.
Apologize? I won't listen to you.
We regret very much to have made you suffer.
Suffer? I suffer. What for? You surely don't suppose I take this matter of Captain Jinks seriously? I, who have the world at my feet, suffer? Excuse me, gentlemen, but I can't have my rehearsal interrupted. Continue, Mrs. G. Now, ladies, please watch me.
Mrs. Greenborough plays. Aurelia dances with abandon.
Smile and look happy.
She does so pathetically, and then dances on with ever-increasing excitement.
Dance as if you loved it, as if it meant something. Put your whole heart into it, if you're so lucky as to have one.
Executing a difficult movement, all clap their hands, delighted at her dancing. Charlie and Gussie stand by somewhat crestfallen and look questioningly at each other. They applaud, too, and then take advantage of the moment to slip out unnoticed.
Dance, don't walk. Dance as if you were mad. Dance, never mind if you break your neck. There are worse things to break. Dance, dance.
The strain of music finishes, and she stops suddenly, throwing away her rose.
Papa, I will sing after all. I'll sing to every woman's heart in that house, and if ever I succeed in my life, I'll win tonight.
Bravo! Bravo!
Aurelia turns and sees Lamartine and Van Valkenburg are gone, and in a revulsion of feeling collapses in her old foster father's arms, sobbing out pitifully,
"Oh no, I can't do it, I can't do it,"
as the curtain falls. End of Act 2. Act 3 of Captain Jinks of the Horse Marines by Clyde Fitch. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The third act. Midnight of the same day. The same room as in the previous act, Madame Trentoni's parlor in the Burns3rd house. The stage is lighted by chandelier with gas jets. Peter, entering with his arms full of flowers.
Come on in.
Mary stands at the back with her arms also full of floral emblems, a large windmill, baskets, a ship, and small bouquets.
Oh my, wasn't it grand?
Places the windmill of pink and white dried daisies on the piano.
I could hear 'em shouting way up in the dressing room.
I bet they heard the gallery way over to Broadway. I led the gallery. And gee, I guess I broke my voice.
Deposits his flowers about. Mary, as she arranges.
Did you see General Grant?
Did I? Didn't you hear us give 3 cheers when he came in? Hip hip hooray! And Sam Tilden, he's another big man. He got it just as good.
There is a knock at the hall door.
Come in.
She hangs a wreath of pansies on a doorknob and meets one of the hotel servants, who enters laden down with more floral emblems, small baskets with huge handles, pillows with "Welcome" on them, etc. Mary relieves him of his burden, and he exits. Peter and Mary arrange the new pieces around the room.
She got piles of flowers, didn't she?
Oh, this ain't Harv.
Peter, sitting at the piano and picking out Captain Jinks with one hand while he talks.
When's she coming home?
Mary, very busy.
Soon as she can shake off her the newspaper, gentlemen, and a heap of people.
She must have been tickled to death with the send-off we gave her.
Mary, loading down the mantle.
No, something's the matter with her. You'd have thought they was a-hissing instead of shouting. She looked that mournful and even took on to crying once.
Ah, go west. You don't know what you're talking about. When I went behind after the show, she was grinning fit to kill, telling them newspaper gents that it was the finest gang of folks she'd ever sung her for.
Yes, she told me when she was changing after the 3rd act that there was dears in front, and that she just loved 'em and was doing her very best.
Say, who do you think was there? I seen her down in the balcony and crying fit to bust herself all through the last act. The old lady what was here this afternoon.
He suddenly shouts.
Look out!
As Mary is about to put a large horseshoe of red immortelles with a big Pete in white immortelles on it off at one side of the room in an inconspicuous place.
What are you doing, my horseshoe?
Taking it from her.
It took my first month's wages in advance to get that.
He places it proudly on the center table and stands off and looks at it.
Ain't it a dream? Don't it look just like her?
Oh, lovely. Is everything ready for the supper?
Going towards the double doors at the back, but Peter gets there before her and stops her.
Here, you can't go in. The hotel folks don't want anyone in there for her. It's all done up with regular 4th of July decorations.
Well, there's more elegant emblems downstairs, and all the gentlemen don't seem to be bringing 'em up. I fancy I'd better get 'em.
And she goes out. Peter watches that she is surely gone, and then opening one of the big double doors, whistles softly through his fingers, and waits a second. Captain Jinks comes in eagerly.
Is it safe?
Yes, for a minute. She's gone after more flower pieces. Are them yourn?
Pointing to some bouquets and baskets grouped together.
Yes.
Examining them.
And not one of my notes removed. But I saw her pick up the white camellia. She must have read that.
Mary says she didn't pay no attention to none of her flowers, and even piped her eyes some.
Cried. My dear Peter, that's a good sign.
Taking out a bundle of small notes from his pocket.
If only she loves me, I'm sure I can make it all right. Come along now, quick, put one of these notes on all the other flowers.
They begin quickly pinning on notes to all the bouquets, baskets, etc.
I don't know as I ought to be helping you this way. After all, I've only got your word for it that you didn't really mean to try and do Madame Trentoni out of her money.
Yes, but what did I tell you my word would be worth to you?
A couple of flowers. But it's taking fearful risks, and I ain't got her happiness for sale. I want you to understand that. But say, you didn't send her all these. Here's somebody else's card.
That's all right.
Crossing to the flowers on the piano.
Leave it on, but put mine too. I want one of my notes on every single thing here.
Peter, pinning the notes about.
Gee, you're a great writer, aren't you? Have you written all of them different?
No, they're all alike.
Coming to center table, he starts to pin a note on Peter's horseshoe.
Here, no you don't. Look out. Not on that one. That's mine. I ain't gonna have no interference with mine.
Oh, come on. Yours might be the only one she looked at. Let me put on my note and I'll pay for the horseshoe.
But you won't pretend you sent it? Honest, Injun?
Honest.
All right. Anything to oblige a friend. It'll be $5, please.
Mary's voice is heard outside.
This way. Come straight along. Oh, I dropped a bouquet. Beg pardon.
Peter and Captain Jinks have stopped, and Captain Jinks goes to the double doors quickly.
Don't forget, you're to manage somehow that I get an interview with Mrs. Greenborough. No interview, no pay.
That's all right. You just trust yourself to little brother.
Captain Jinks, thrusting a handful of notes into Peter's hands.
Try and get those on the rest of the flowers.
He exits. Peter, calling after him.
Quick! Hide in the further room. They may go in this one.
He shuts the doors as Mary enters loaded down with more flowers, and followed by Mrs. Stonington and Miss Merriam, without their hats and with a flower in their hair, the waist of Mrs. Stonington's dress turned in a trifle at the neck.
Won't you sit down, please? The other guests will certainly be here soon.
Mary places about the flowers she has just brought up. Peter continues pinning on the notes.
It was very kind of Madame Trentoni to ask us to supper on such an occasion. She is the greatest singer I have ever heard.
Turns to Miss Merriam and repeats with most careful enunciation.
An elegant singer.
Miss Merriam smiles and nods, and makes a few rapid motions with her fingers.
Oh, yes, very hot. Where we sat, we were in the back row gallery. We found it very difficult to get seats.
Mary is about to pass her with a small basket of flowers with a very high handle, on which is perched a stuffed pigeon with outstretched wings. Mrs. Stonington stops Mary.
The dove!
She examines the card, which is tied on with a blue ribbon, and then nods to Miss Merriam.
Yes, our emblem.
I never heard Madam sing Traviata so magnificent before.
She crosses to the piano with the emblem. Miss Merriam motions again, a few words to Mrs. Stonington.
No, indeed. I didn't see a single bad thing in it.
Miss Merriam motions again.
No, sir, not a blessed thing. I agree with you to an iota. I think it's a sweetly pretty opera.
Miss Merriam makes a few more rapid passes.
Exactly. Neither did I understand what it was about. But nobody has any need to. It's enough to hear her voice and see her clothes.
Miss Merriam motions.
My dear, you never spoke a truer word. You can find a bad meaning in most everything in this world if you want to, and only try hard enough.
Mrs. Greenborough calls outside in the hall.
Mary!
Yes, madam.
Going to the hall door, she opens it.
Here's dear Mrs. Greenborough, and she does look sweetly pretty tonight.
Mrs. Greenborough enters, both arms full of floral trophies.
What an elegant triumph, Mary. Did you ever in all the days you've been with Madame Trentoni?
No, indeed, madam.
Helping Mrs. Greenborough relieve herself of the flowers.
I never heard such a grand reception.
Peter, who is pinning notes on bouquets in a corner.
Bet your life you couldn't beat our gallery.
He begins to pin Captain Jinks's notes to the flowers Mrs. Greenborough has just brought in.
Good evening, Mrs. Greenborough.
Mrs. Greenborough, turning.
Oh, you are here, my dears. Excuse me, I didn't see you.
Kissing them both.
Well, what do you think? Did you ever in your life? Wasn't I right, or did I?
No, siree. You didn't exaggerate one bit. We are going to make a report to the League that her voice is superb.
Miss Merriam tugs at her elbow. Mrs. Stonington turns. Miss Merriam makes a few motions. Mrs. Stonington to Miss Merriam.
Yes, dear.
To Mrs. Greenborough.
We're going to add to our report that anyone can go. because no one understands what it's about unless they have an evil mind.
Oh, my darlings, I'm so glad you think so. You remember what I told you. What I always said was...
Yes, indeed, we've been saying it over to ourselves. And do tell me if I've got the neck of my basque too low. I've turned in 3 buttons. I want it to be real dressy, but I don't want to catch cold. I wouldn't let Miss Merriam turn hers in, but she's so delicate. I told her she'd look very stylish in her black silk if she'd put on that pretty bib of hers.
You both look very fetching, but I must ask you to come into another room to wait, if you don't mind. Aurelia sent me home first to see that the guests didn't assemble here. We've taken a little parlour on the other side of the banquet room. She's all upset, poor child, unstrung. Come this way.
Leading them to the double doors. Peter gets there first and takes Mrs. Greenborough's arm and whispers into her ear. Mrs. Stonington and Miss Merriam are trying to read the cards on the different bouquets, etc. Mrs. Greenborough, surprised at what Peter tells her.
What?
Peter nods his head violently.
You little scamp. You ought to be spanked, and I'd like to do it.
Oh, would you? I guess you'd have your hands full. Let Miss Mary take them through the other way.
Motioning to the hall door. Mrs. Greenborough gives Peter a speaking look and then turns.
Ladies, Mary will show you into the room through the hall. I will join you presently.
Mary goes to the door. Miss Merriam starts quickly to follow her.
Sophie! Sophie!
Miss Merriam, of course, does not hear her and goes on. Mrs. Stonington runs after her and catches her at the door. She motions to her to wait. Mrs. Stonington then goes to Mrs. Greenborough and whispers to her questioningly.
I'll ask her.
And do you think she will?
Yes, she's willing to do just anything for friends of mine, no matter what it is.
Mrs. Stonington hurries to Miss Merriam and says delightedly, with very careful enunciation,
She thinks we can kiss her.
Miss Merriam claps her hands with joy, her face wreathed in smiles, as she and Mrs. Stonington follow Mary out into the hall. Mrs. Greenborough, turning upon Peter,
You naughty little boy, you. Why did you let Captain Jinks in there?
'Cause he has my sympathies. You don't know all, but I do. He went to jail for her sake, and no hero ever done better than that for his girl, not even in the Fireside Companion.
You're out of your head.
No, I ain't.
Opening one of the double doors, he whistles.
Wait and see.
Captain Jinks comes in.
Well, sir, I must say...
Don't say it. We haven't much time. Persuade Madame Trentoni to see me.
Papa Belliarti has told me what you did.
If I could see her, I could explain.
I don't think explaining could do us much good.
Yes, it would if she loves me.
Loves you? Now? After that scandalous wager?
Well, then, if she ever loved me, I'm sure I can persuade her.
I don't mind telling you, young man, that she did love you. That's the blessed truth. If you could have heard her talk in her sleep as I have, why, only the other afternoon.
She did love me?
Yes, she did. I don't see any harm in telling that.
Captain Jinks, suddenly in outburst of joy, hugs Mrs. Greenborough and kisses her.
God bless you, Mrs. G. God bless you for that.
Peter half enters hurriedly.
Psst.
He sees them embracing.
Holly G.
They separate.
Say, which one is it you're after?
Shut up, Peter.
Well, you better get. She's coming.
Oh, do go. She's in an awful hysterical state. No, not that way.
Captain Jinks at the double doors.
Yes, I shall wait here till you bring me word that she will see me. She must see me. Yes, tonight.
No, tomorrow.
No, tonight.
He exits. Mrs. Greenborough to Peter.
Take him through into the parlour where the other guests are assembling. Don't let him stay in there.
Pushing Peter out after Captain Jinks.
Oh, dear me, sirs, what am I to do?
Professor Belliarti comes in, and Aurelia follows. She is gowned in a billowy mass of white tarlatan, showered over with pink rosebuds, and emphasized here and there with bright green ribbon. Her bustle and train crowd the furniture in the room. A wreath of pink rosebuds is on her head. She carries a cloak and a white lace scarf in her hands, and a bouquet. She throws them away from her anywhere. Mrs. Greenborough runs after her and picks them up.
For just 5 minutes, Aurelia. Come, please.
No, Papa, I cannot.
Professor Belliarti to Mrs. Greenborough.
I want her to be present at her supper.
You can make any excuse for me you like.
But, my dear child...
I mean it, Papa. I've sung tonight for your sake more than anything else, but I can't do anything more, and it's the last time I'll do that.
Aurelia, when you never had so great a triumph.
Triumph? Triumph? Over a few people.
Few people? Many hundreds.
Hundreds, then. And what do I care? The only triumph I want is denied me, the triumph of love. Oh, Papa, you can't understand how I feel. You're only a man. You say the people tonight stood up and shouted themselves hoarse. Did they? I heard nothing but the beating of my poor heart. You say I have been deluged with gifts of flowers, but the only gift I want is missing. One man's honest love. With that, tonight would have been a triumph. I would have given him my success as my first gift, but without his love it all means nothing. I don't want success. I don't want anything.
Not even any supper?
No, ask them to excuse me.
She sinks on the piano stool and buries her face in her arms and cries. A brass band strikes up loudly outside the window. Hail, the conquering hero, comes. And at the same moment Peter rushes in.
Hurrah! There's a big band come to serenade Madame Trentoni. You must go to the window.
He runs out. Professor Belliarti opens a window. Loud cries come from the outside. Trentoni! Trentoni!
Oh, isn't it beautiful?
Professor Belliarti to Aurelia.
Come, dear. Come and bow to them.
I can't.
You must. It will anger them.
Oh, goodness, you mustn't do that, Aurelia.
Nurse your success. It will mean everything.
No.
Louder cries again of Aurelia, Aurelia, and Trentoni, and wilder shouts still outside. Peter again runs in.
Quick, please, bow at the window. They're beginning to get mad.
Again he runs out shouting.
Come to the window.
A few baws and hisses are heard. Then the shouts and the band stop.
No!
Mrs. G, quick, put Aurelia's scarf on your head.
She does so.
You must take her place.
But do you think we look anything alike?
Never mind, it's dark. They can't distinguish anything. Come on.
Taking her to the window.
Bow to them and wave.
She does so.
That's it, again.
Great shouts and hurrahs. Cries of Trentoni forever, God bless you, Aurelia, etc. The band plays the Star-Spangled Banner. Aurelia begins to listen and show some interest.
Throw them kisses.
Mrs. Greenborough does so. Increased shouts and cries of speech, speech.
Oh, good gracious, what'll I do now?
Speak. Say something.
No, come away from the window. I'll speak to them.
Mrs. Greenborough has come away. When she leaves the window, the clamor outside hushes disappointedly. Aurelia takes the lace scarf and goes to the window, really moved, and speaks.
How good of them. This morning, how I should have loved this.
She reaches the window, and the applause and shouts double, with louder cries of "Speech," and the band stops.
Thank you.
Hurrahs and bravos very loud outside.
Thank you all.
More shouts and greater applause.
Thank you.
She throws kisses with both hands and adds in an excited outburst,
You're darlings, every one of you.
Tremendous cheers as she leaves the window, and the brass band strikes up Champagne Charlie. It dies away with the shouts of the crowd outside as they gradually disperse. Aurelia has gone from the window to the piano and takes up a note there on the flowers. She reads it.
I must see you. There has been a terrible mistake. If you ever loved me, give me an interview.
Professor Belliarti, who has followed her, speaks softly over her shoulder.
Don't trust him.
Aurelia continues reading the other notes and shows on her face her surprise at finding them all the same.
Papa, you go to our guests and I'll speak to Aurelia.
No, you go. I have something to say to her.
Aurelia still reads the notes.
I must see you. There is a terrible mistake. If you ever loved me.
Mrs. Greenborough goes out through the double doors. Peter comes in after knocking.
Say, General Sherman's just come and they all want to know where Madame Trentoni is.
Mrs. Greenborough has gone to them.
Hurry up. They're getting mad and one of them ballet girls, the widow, is hooking oranges from off the table. She said it's for the kid.
He exits.
But these notes are all the same.
Looking quickly at another.
The same.
Professor Belliarti reading one on the center table.
The same. Here, dear, don't read them.
Gathering several unread notes into his hands and crushing them.
No, Papa.
Taking them out of his hands.
Be careful. I want to read them. Every one.
A knock is heard on the hall door.
Come in.
Please, I don't want to see anyone.
The 4th Ballet Lady, Miss Hochspitz, enters, followed by all the other ballet ladies, who group themselves in a semicircle behind her.
Pardon, I have come mit ein klein message from der ballet ladies.
With a curtsy.
Madame Trentoni is very ill. Worn out with the excitement of her debut.
Ja, das ist what the old woman told us. And we was all so troublig. I represent the old ballet ladies when I come and says that we all give to Madame Trentoni our loaf and say that she was wunderschön. And der best singer what we has ever danced mit.
Curtsies and kisses Aurelia's hand. All the ballet ladies clap their hands and cry, "Hear, hear."
Thank you very much, and all the ladies. I'm sure you all danced very well, too.
We have made besser mit our feet when you have made so good mit your mouth.
Thank you again, and I hope you will all enjoy your supper.
We will eat.
The widow here inadvertently claps.
Aber not so much when you was nicht mit der party. This wreath was made by our own hands, just now mit snips from out of our own bouquets.
Giving wreath.
That was give us by our sweethearts.
Thank you.
Good night. We will all pet our toes. You was the greatest success ever was. Good night.
They all curtsy and turn to go out through the double doors at the back. As they exit, Pettitos and Hochspitz embrace in an excess of good feeling.
Good night.
Closing the door behind them.
You go to the supper too, dear Papa.
No, dearie, I can't leave you.
A knock on the hall door. Aurelia, again bright and hopeful.
Maybe that's he. Come in.
Peter enters.
This came for you this evening from the Everett house.
Giving Aurelia an envelope.
Thank you.
Peter, to Professor Belliarti.
Did you see my horseshoe? I tell you.
He exits haughtily.
What is that?
2 tickets for the vessel that sails tomorrow for Liverpool.
Where did you get them?
I sent for them between the acts, for Mary and me.
Give me those tickets.
No!
I've never coerced you in your life, have I, dear?
No, and I have never disobeyed you, have I?
No, and you will not go away tomorrow.
This time, if you coerce, I disobey.
You can't go away. What about Mr. Mapleson?
He can send for Adelina Patti. She made a furore here a year or so ago.
Adelina Patti isn't you.
Oh, well, she's as young as I, and a better singer, if the truth told.
But your contract.
Oh, hang my contract.
We can't. It'll hang us. Give me those tickets.
Aurelia holding them up in front of his face.
In exchange for Captain Jinks, for nothing else.
Won't you realize he is unworthy of you?
He said so, and I wouldn't believe it, and I shan't believe it when you say so either.
Well, we'll go to supper now. We'll talk it over later.
No, I must pack with Mary. We haven't much time.
No, come with me now. You must.
I won't. There.
Taking off one of her long curls that hang from the back of her waterfall.
And there.
Taking off the other curl and placing both upon the piano.
Now will you believe me?
A knock on the hall door.
Oh, perhaps that is he. Wait a minute, Papa. Didn't say come in yet.
And she quickly puts back both curls.
Now, come in.
The policeman, remembered in Act 1, enters with much assurance.
Beg pardon, ma'am, but is Captain Jinks here?
Aurelia echoes, surprised.
Captain Jinks?
Certainly not.
Well, he was seen coming into the hotel not long since, and I thought maybe he was one of the invites at your party.
I can assure you that the apartment of Madame Trentoni is the last place you would find Captain Jinks. That gentleman is no longer our friend.
Don't say! Well, he skipped his bail this afternoon, which your Mr. Mapleson put up for him, and he's wanted by the police.
The police?
Why did Mr. Mapleson go bail for him?
Give it up. Echo answers why.
I mean, what's he done? Why?
Aurelia stops Professor Belliarti.
Papa, that's not our affair. We have no interest in Captain Jinks's misdeeds.
She turns to the policeman.
Good night, sir.
The policeman, going, slightly embarrassed.
Good night, Mom.
He comes back, becoming more and more embarrassed, however.
Beg pardon, Mum. I was in the lobby of the Academy tonight, trying to keep the aisles free, and I had to give it up as a bad job. But even with the door shut, I could hear you. Some of them high notes of yourn came clean through the wood. It was grand. They fairly put my teeth on edge. Best I ever heard.
Aurelia, half smiling.
Thank you.
Shakes his hand, which makes him very proud.
Thank you. Good night, Mom. Good night, sir.
Bows and exits. Aurelia and Professor Belliarti look at each other a second in silence.
Now you understand Mapleson's knowledge, and you have had an escape, my dear.
I don't believe, not even yet. I don't want to escape.
Mrs. Greenborough returns.
Everybody's arrived, dear heart, so I thought it best for us to come into the supper room and begin. I hope I haven't gone and...
You haven't. You did quite right, Mrs. G.
Aurelia won't come?
No, but I'll start things going.
They go to the double doors, and Mrs. Greenborough exits. Professor Belliarti, about to follow, changes his mind, and closing the door, goes back to Aurelia. As Mrs. Greenborough exits, the guests in the back room begin to sing Auld Lang Syne, which is heard more faintly when the door is closed. Aurelia sits on the piano stool, her head and arms on the piano. Professor Belliarti leans over her and speaks softly.
Shall I make a little speech for you, dearie, and say you thank them all and want them to have a happy evening?
Aurelia, who cannot speak because of her tears, lifts her head and nods yes. Professor Belliarti goes into the back room, and the singing is louder as the door opens, till it is shut. Aurelia, when she realizes she is alone, takes from the bosom of her dress a white camellia, to which is attached a note, which she reads aloud in a pathetic little voice, half crying all through and breaking down entirely at the end.
I must see you. There is a terrible mistake. If you ever loved me, give me an interview.
She cries softly, leaning her head and arms on the piano. She then rises deliberately and pulls the bell cord.
I'll see him myself. He hasn't had any chance to explain, and I'll give it to him. But I won't make it easy.
Peter enters in answer to the bell.
Yes, ma'am?
Peter, do you want to do me a favour?
Oh, I bet you'll laugh.
I'll pay you well.
No, you won't. Not from you. Not this boy.
I'm afraid it will be hard for you, but do you think you could find Captain Jinks somewhere tonight and bring him here without telling anyone?
Peter, secretly amused.
Well, I might try, if you don't mind waiting. Of course, if he's way over to Brooklyn.
I won't mind waiting if you'll only find him.
I guess I'll tell you the truth. He's right here.
Here?
Yes, ma'am. He's been in this room. He and I put all them notes on.
You did? You brought him here? You're a dear boy.
She kisses his cheek. Peter, overcome with joy, pride, and emotion, holds his hand to his cheek.
Oh, gee. Thank you. I'll never wash that spot.
Now listen, don't let Captain Jinks know I sent you for him. Pretend I don't know he's here and just send him in.
It won't take much sending. It's been all I could do to keep him out.
He exits.
Of course he can explain. I knew it, and he's only been waiting for his chance.
Tears up the steamer tickets.
But he's got to work for it. He must be punished a little for something or other. I'm sure I must look a fright after all I've gone through.
Standing on the sofa, she looks at herself in the glass over the mantel.
I'll just put a little dab of powder on.
She hurries out through the door to her bedroom as Peter shows in Captain Jinks.
She's not here.
Oh, I guess she's gone to her room to prink up a little.
For her guests at supper?
No, she won't join them. It's for you.
But she doesn't expect to see me, does she?
Look here. All's fair in love and war. Guess I'll tell you the truth. She sent me after you.
Captain Jinks, not daring to believe his ears.
What?
She told me to try hard to find you, but don't tell. She said to keep mum.
Peter, you're an ideal boy. Here's $1 for you.
Gives him a bill.
Thank you.
Exits. The guests are heard through the double doors singing Champagne Charlie. Aurelia re-enters. Aurelia, stopping short in an only partially successful effort to simulate surprise.
Captain Jinks!
Madam.
How dared you come here? Had you sent your card, I should have refused to see you.
With great but not altogether convincing hauteur.
And had you sent for me, I should have refused to come.
I send for you? Impossible.
At any rate, here I am, and you won't get rid of me until I've straightened everything out. Ever since I left your room this afternoon, I've been searching my brain and scouring the town for proof to show that I have done nothing dishonorable to you, to prove myself worthy at least of your respect.
I do not ask for proofs, but I fear the police are not so lenient as a woman.
The police?
Yes, The police? They've been here looking for you.
By George, I forgot. At 2:00 I was due. I'll tell you why the police want me.
Thank you, I don't care to know.
Is that honest?
Aurelia, melting a little.
No, it's not honest. Of course, I'm dying to know.
The day you landed, I gave the inspector a little bill to go easy with your trunks, and he gave me in charge. That's all. Can't you forgive me if at 2:00 I thought of nothing except that I had lost your love?
Yes, I think I can forgive that.
A knock on the hall door.
Please don't answer it.
Come in.
Peter backs into the room. Captain Jinks to Peter.
What are you doing? Turn around.
Peter turning.
That's what I call having tack.
To Aurelia.
Them seem two lardy-daws. Are you out as usual?
No, in.
Out.
In.
How dare you? Out.
In.
Yes, sir.
Show them up.
Yes, sir.
He exits.
I sent for La Martine and Van Valkenburg in your name.
My name? How dared you?
Oh, it did take a little pluck, but I've so much at stake I must try everything to win.
A knock on the hall door.
Come in.
Charlie and Gussie enter.
You sent for us, Madame Trentoni?
I did not. I wonder at your presumption in appearing here.
No more presumption in us than in Jinks.
It was I who sent for you to come in Madame Trentoni's name.
What did you do that for?
Because it would be no use explaining about the cursed agreement and denying things behind your backs. I must do it before your faces and in her presence. I'm not afraid and not ashamed, because I will speak the truth.
Good.
And I'm going to trust you to say what is true. I won't believe you two men would be willing to lie away the happiness and honor of anyone, let alone an old friend.
Certainly not.
You'll tell the truth about the wager affair?
Of course.
And you, Gus?
Why, yes.
This bet, then. Did we make it before we saw her?
I don't remember.
And didn't I repudiate it the minute I had seen this lady as an insult to her?
No.
What?
No.
Good evening. That's all I want out of you.
What do you mean?
Peter?
Peter enters and stands by the door.
Yes, sir.
Show this gentleman out.
Look here.
Out.
Charlie sneers and snaps open his crush hat into Captain Jinks's face and exits, bowed out by Peter.
Now, Gussie, what do you say? Wasn't that bet made before we'd seen Madame Trentoni?
No.
Peter.
Yes, sir.
Captain Jinks to Gussie.
Good night. Quick, Peter, this gentleman's in a hurry.
Gussie seizes a large bouquet which lies on the table and smashes it on the floor and then exits, followed out by Peter.
Jackasses. I sent for my friends hoping they would speak the truth and exonerate me. Now I must do without them. I did make that bet, but before I saw you.
But you did make the bet.
But before I'd seen you. Before I'd seen you. And then only as a joke. I've won your love honestly, and I don't mean to lose it. I've waited until this evening should be over and your triumph won. The evening is over and your triumph is won. I've allowed Papa Belliarti to blackguard me, the old lady to flout me, but now it's my turn, and you've got to believe in me. I won't leave you till you do.
Aurelia, reading his true nature in his face and convinced by his manly sincerity, begins to decidedly relent.
What was the old bet, anyway?
That I would get up a flirtation with you.
A flirtation? Is that all? But your friend said...
Oh, well, you know one's friends will say anything. And such friends.
And there was nothing about marriage in the bet?
No, nothing so serious as that. And I withdrew the foolish wager as soon as I had seen you.
Did I look so unpromising as all that?
And you meant it this morning when you told me you loved me, didn't you?
Yes.
On my soul, you can trust me with your happiness. Forgive me. You must forgive me and believe in me.
Is that all?
No, and love me.
Oh.
Say it.
I forgive you, I believe in you, and...
She hesitates.
And?
And I...
A knock at the door, and the policeman enters suddenly.
Aha! There you are!
He stands and looks at Captain Jinks triumphantly. Great consternation on the part of Aurelia and Captain Jinks.
I thought I'd catch you near the singing bird's cage.
No, no.
Going to the policeman.
Mr. Policeman, Captain Jinks isn't here.
Oh, isn't he, Mum?
No, you don't see him.
Oh, don't I?
Couldn't you be just a little nearsighted, just to please me?
Couldn't be stone blind, Mum. Wouldn't be right.
I give you my word of honor I will appear in court the first thing tomorrow.
And I'll give you my word of honor, too. Now, you don't see him here, do you?
Meaning no disrespect to you, lady, I can't take his word for it. He skipped his bail.
But my word.
Sorry, but we learned a passage to Europe was taken in your name tonight. Now, you're singing here all winter and have made a P.T. Barnum success, so that there passage can't be for you, and we've pretty well twigged to the little game.
Good gracious, what an idea!
To Captain Jinks.
Look here, let's tell him the truth.
What?
Why, that you...
Captain Jinks, crossing to the policeman, speaks desperately.
I'm head over heels in love with her, officer, and that doesn't half express it.
Aurelia, quickly following Captain Jinks and taking his arm.
And we had a quarrel this noon.
I thought I'd lost her, and it drove everything else out of my mind.
And I felt so beastly I took that passage and was going to sail tomorrow.
Do you believe us?
I'm thinking.
Shh, he's thinking.
We've made it all up now, and we're going back in there where Mapleson is.
Pointing to the back room.
And if I'm with him, surely you can trust me.
And you have his word of honor.
To Captain Jinks.
Give him your hand.
Captain Jinks does so.
And her word of honor.
Yes, sir.
Putting her hand on Captain Jinks's and the policeman's. The policeman is very much embarrassed. They all separate.
Do you see Captain Jinks now?
The policeman, after a look all about the room.
Not a sign of him.
Oh, you darling.
Seizing Peter's large horseshoe, she loads his arms with it, and he hurries out. She starts to go to Captain Jinks, but Professor Belliarti enters from the back room. She rushes to her foster father and embraces him.
Those two men lied to you. You must believe in him. I do.
Professor Belliarti comes slowly down the room.
I made no bet about marrying Madame Trentoni, sir. I did make a foolish wager before seeing her that I would flirt with her. After meeting your foster daughter on the dock, I realized the unworthiness of our wager, and I drew up that IOU to pay up as if I'd lost, so we might call it all off. She's forgiven me. Won't you?
Professor Belliarti looks him searchingly straight in the eyes. Captain Jinks, hesitatingly, offering his cigar case.
Have a cigar, sir.
Professor Belliarti looks from one to the other, then takes a cigar graciously and gives Captain Jinks his hand.
Thank you. And I do gladly take that blackguard back.
Aurelia starts to embrace him. He eludes her embrace, leaving Captain Jinks's arms to enfold her. Professor Belliarti, opening the double doors at back.
Ladies and gentlemen, the health and happiness of Captain Jinks and his promised bride.
As Professor Belliarti gives the toast, all cry, "Hooray!" and at the same moment Peter rushes in with his clothes half torn off his back, but with his horseshoe in his arms.
No, he didn't. Not my horseshoe.
As all the guests, having drunk the toast, begin to sing Captain Jinks of the Horse Marines, Aurelia, happy and proud on Captain Jinks's arm, goes to join her friends, and the curtain falls. End of Act 3. End of Captain Jinks of the Horse Marines by Clyde Fitch.